as we drove out of the green zone, I remember thinking, crikey, there's a lot of Iraqi police outside the green zone. That's not normal. And I leant forward and I said, is everything okay? And they said, yeah, we've lost radio contact with the car behind us. It must be a blackout area. And I see the team leader of my British security team surrounded by 5 Iraqis. So at this point, I thought we were under arrest. I thought it was a document infringement, and that was the problem. And they took off my ID badge and they passed it to the guy in the front. He looked at it and threw it out the window. And that's when I was like, oh, he looked at it. This is an abduction.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm AJ Pasciuti, a retired Marine, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, and Marine Gunner with 21 years of service, multiple combat tours, and a lifetime of lessons learned in the arena itself. On this show, I sit down with warriors from every front line to uncover what combat truly feels like and how it shapes the way we see life, each other, and ourselves. This is Combat Story.
Today on Combat Story, we're joined by Peter Moore, a British IT consultant who took what was supposed to be a short contract in Baghdad, helping to build financial systems inside Iraq's Ministry of Finance, and instead walked into a kidnapping that would keep him caged for 946 days. 4 men went in with him as part of his security detail. Peter came home, and they didn't. What kept him alive wasn't Hollywood toughness. It was routine, endurance, dark humor, quick wits, and the stubborn decision to keep his mind from collapsing when the walls closed in. This isn't a combat story in the traditional sense, but it is a story about endurance, identity, and staying human when your world shrinks to 4 walls and a locked door. This is Combat Story. Welcome back to Combat Story, everyone. As everyone knows, my name is AJ Pasciuti, and I am excited to sit down here today with a new friend from across the pond, Peter Moore. So Peter Moore has a very unique story that we were absolutely fascinated to find out about, and we worked very hard to ensure that we could sit down and ask a lot of questions of Peter Moore. So we're really happy to have this conversation. Peter Moore is a British IT consultant and who took a short-term contract in Baghdad in 2007, where he was working inside of Iraq's Ministry of Finance, and was, had a long kind of process through there. But everything kind of turned on May 27th, 2007, when he and 4 British security guards were abducted by a specific force of which I'm sure we'll get into, and then was held captive for over 2.5 years. So we found this story, wanted to be able to kind of, have a great conversation. So with that, I'd really like to, say thank you, Peter, and welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to have you, and a big fan of our friends across the pond, and really excited to have this kind of conversation. So normally what we do on Combat Story is we ask a lot of the veterans or service organizations, whatever it is, their genesis of why they joined the military, because we're generally a military-focused kind of podcast. But yours is so unique. I want to know what was your kind of upbringing like, to eventually lead you into this world of becoming an IT consultant that kind of took you globally. Can you bring us through a little bit of like your background of how you led into this field in the first place?
Yeah, sure. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a city called Lincoln, which is, a 2,000-year-old city, Roman city, not named after Abraham Lincoln or anything like that.
Americans would probably like to say that it was.
Yes, yeah. I grew up there and I got involved in Scouts, and I did very well. Ultimately, I was in there for years. I started at the age of 8. I went through Cub Scouts and then what you call Boy Scouts, and I got the Chief Scout Award and then the Queen Scout Award, which is like your Eagle Scout Award.
Hey, I'm an Eagle Scout. No way.
Ah, brilliant. Nice. Fantastic. And of course, now it's the King Scout Award, of course.
Sure.
Queen died. So following that, I sort of wanted to work overseas, but I also had an interest in computing, electronics, that sort of thing. So I started studying computing. So we have like a tiered system. So I finished school at 16, which is normal. And then I went to college for a couple of years. And then I worked in IT for a few years. And then I decided to get a degree and I went to university. This was sort of 1995 to 98. I did my bachelor's degree in IT, worked for a little bit more in the UK. And during this time, I learned that actually you could go and work overseas, doing international development. But I realized they needed a master's degree to sort of get in there. So I did my master's degree with the intention of traveling overseas and working in IT overseas. And while I was doing my master's degree, I applied to an organization called Voluntary Services Overseas, which is like our version of your Peace Corps. Okay. So I was offered a number of places. South Africa was one, Eritrea was another, and Guyana was the other country. I'd never heard of Guyana, didn't know anything about it really. So I picked it. I thought I'll go there. So it was great. I did 2 years working for the land ministry there, traveling around the Amazon rainforest. I don't know if people know, but Guyana's on the northeastern part of South America, and it's basically the size of England, but only 750,000 people live there, most of them on the coast. So sort of 80-90% of it is uninhabited. It's just rainforest. So it was great. I got to travel around the whole of the rainforest, riding motorcycles and speedboats and stuff like that.
And what age are you at this time frame?
So at this time, let me think. So it was 99, 2000. 2004 is when I went. So I would have been, how old was I? 20,
like early 20s?
2000. Yeah, 30, something like that. 29, 30.
How awesome of an experience of kind of, now you have a little bit of like, degrees and educational experience under your belt. And you have this kind of, I don't know, worldview of, where you're at, being raised near Nottingham, right? Really working hard as an American, not to say Nottingham, because that is a super, so trying to do my best by saying Nottingham.
You're okay. You're doing good.
And then, I appreciate it. And then flying over right to South America, where the rainforest, again, the population size, this must have been, I mean, like as unique as the moon to you, right? Stepping into this whole different world.
Sure, and you've got to. So obviously, as scouts, I travelled around a lot, doing a lot of camping. So that's where I got it from, right? But you've got to bear in mind, in the UK, travelling 100 miles is like going to Mars or something. So for me to suddenly go and fly to South America, I was telling my friends I was going to Guyana. Most people were like, where is that? Ghana, Africa? Like, no. So everyone thought I was crazy. So maybe I was.
I love that. And so what were you doing for, and remind me, so we would call it the Peace Corps. What was the name of the organization one more time?
VSO, Voluntary Services Overseas. They call it VSO as a shortened form. So.
And what were you doing for the VSO?
So I was assigned to the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, and they're responsible for mapping the country. And I was working on an agricultural project. So what had happened was during World War I, World War II, because Guyana was a British colony at the time, the people that fought on the British side, the British government gave those people land. Over time, they had children and their ancestors sort of inherited this land, but the records were not kept up to date. So my job was to create a database of who owned what land where and how much land do they really own, right? So that was.
I would seem like if the records weren't super good, you're like, yeah, I also own that creek over there.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And they were very, at the time when they were written, at the end of World War I, for example, when these people were given their land, it was just descriptive. It was like, whatever, 100 feet from John's shed, that kind of thing. It's like,
there's like no plot lines. They're very loose. So, this guy owns most of the Amazon, right?
That's right.
The rainforest. Yeah,
indeed. So that was primarily my job, and I did that for 2 years, and then I stayed on for a third year, but that was with the mining commission. I sort of transferred, and they dealt with gold mines, more in the interior. So exactly the same concept, mapping of gold gold mines, but who owned what area of gold and all that sort of thing. You know, who was encroaching on someone else's land and that kind of thing. It was the same stuff. It was databases. It was working in a system called GIS, Geographical Information System.
Very familiar.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
So,
GIS is fantastic, and especially I'm sure it was very cutting edge at that time as
yeah.
well. Was GIS able to cut through the rainforest and the triple canopy, going and covering what you
Not
did?
at that, not at that time. So lidar and all that sort of thing came out. It did come out while I was there, but towards the very end of my assignment. So the reality is we're up to what 2007. I've been away for a number of years at this point, and working in the voluntary sector, international development with this organization. I always say it was good for the soul, but not good for the bank account. So I had student
Turns out.
loans and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So
It seems like there's almost like an inverse relationship between the
yeah,
two, right? As you see this a lot. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really interesting job, but obviously it didn't pay very well. And
Yeah.
I tell you what, people complain about the NSA spying on you. They have nothing on the British Student Loans Company. They were sending me letters into the middle of the jungle that, no one would ever be able to find me, sort of thing. So, you know, yeah, I thought I
That's funny.
better do
I love
something
that.
about this.
Death and taxes, right?
Yes,
And
yeah,
student
yeah,
loans,
yeah,
apparently.
yeah, yeah. So I thought I've got to do something as great as this volunteering is. I'm going to end up being whatever made bankrupt or something. I'm going to have to do something about it. So I started applying for other work, and I saw this advert, and to this day, I swear it said they were looking for an IT person to work in the islands. Clearly, I didn't read it well. I was thinking Caribbean islands and all this sort of stuff. So I sent my CV off.
Glossed over that part, right?
Yes, yeah. And I get a call from someone in Iraq. I was like, "What?" And I looked at the advert again. It's like, "Oh, IT person in Iraq." I was like, I don't, yeah. So yeah, they the way it's all in the sales line, isn't it? The way they sold it to me, it was like you'll be working in this safe green zone. You'll have a load of bodyguards. They'll drive you around. Although it's dangerous on the news, in reality, where what you're going to be doing, you're just an IT guy. No one's going to care about you. We just want you to pop over to the Ministry of Finance a couple of times a week, do a bit of training, come back, have an easy gig, do it for a couple of months, and then go away again. Yeah.
Right. Pretty cut and paste, easy to go, right? Very like light and easy.
Yeah.
And so how was this kind of conversation, almost like with yourself on when you're kind of looking at like, okay, so we're not going to the islands, we're going to Iraq, right? Very different. And then, 2006, when did you take the contract?
2007 it was. So April 2007 is when that insurgency was actually happening.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
there. Yeah, I
Oh,
was there
were you?
around that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Right.
I just left for my third tour in 2006. And so, yeah, it was hot. It was not a
Yeah.
safe place in the entire country, and very like the destabilization was kind of, we were trying to get it back under hold, right? And I think we're working towards that.
Yeah.
And so what was the role of so did they explain what you were doing with IT, or just like back end work, in the
So
adverts?
what what had happened was they had installed a computer system in the Ministry of Finance. Purely by coincidence, it was the same computer system that had been installed in the Ministry of Finance in Guyana. Now,
Ah,
didn't I wasn't directly working with the system, but obviously I had interaction with the system and I knew the people that worked on it. So I had awareness of what of the system and how it should or shouldn't work. And primarily what they wanted me to do was to develop reports, so they could see where money was being spent by department. The reporting system wasn't working.
okay.
So I had a few ideas about that because I've been developing with GIS. I had lots of databases and I used the GIS software to
Yep.
create reports, right? Admittedly, it was mapping, not financial, but
But
same
still, I mean,
concept. Yeah.
again, it's data amalgamation, right, into bite-sized, digestible chunks.
Yeah.
That in which is measured can be improved, right? And so you're able to
Uh,
kind of, and that's what Iraq really needed at that time, was like trying to wrap our arms around this, like kind of, unambiguous, or I would say disambiguous. I don't know if that's a word, but I would say kind of nebulous. Let's go into my
yes.
vocabulary where I can. A
Yeah.
nebulous government, right? That's kind of trying to create itself. So they need a little bit of structure inside of there. That makes a lot of
Indeed.
sense.
Yeah. And it was it's probably worth pointing out, it was a USAID funded project.
Oh,
So it was an American government kind of funded project. Not that I'd never worked, obviously, I'm British. I'd never worked on a American government project before, but aid agencies are aid agencies. Well, at the time, the UK was in Guyana. They had Department for International Development, which is the British version of USA. They've changed the name now, but that's what I was working on. So that was fine. I was okay with it.
So what kind of went through your mind when you were, deliberating? So you heard about this idea, thought it was an island, turns out it's Iraq. And like, there's almost seems like there's like this mental checklist of like, okay, I mean, like okay, it's not an island, it's Iraq. Okay. Green zone, right? How are you weighing these things? I'm sure that there was a financial incentive. I understand that time frame was probably a heavy financial incentive that leaned it towards it. But how did you kind of eventually work towards, going into because it's not a normal thing for a person, especially a civilian, to say, I'm going to go right into a war zone and try to, kind of handle some stuff. So it's kind of interesting.
So I'll just talk about the finances first. So the financial aspect wasn't as amazing as you think. The security contractors were on mega money. But what was going to happen was I was going to be a direct employee of a company called Bearing Point, which was based in Washington, D.C. So I was a salaried employee. So don't get me wrong, the salary was good. It was like 100,000 US a year. But it wasn't, there was people, making whatever, 10,000 a day or something like that. I wasn't in that league, So what went through my mind? Well, first of all, I thought, well, I knew there was green zone because they told me about it. And I knew there was a red zone because I'd seen that on the news. So my logic said, well, there's obviously a gradient there, isn't there, between green to red, right? You'd have green, yellow, amber, orange, red, right? No. When I got out to Iraq, I realized the green zone was like the middle of Baghdad, a really small part.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the country was red. Yeah. I was surprised how small it was. It's not even, you can't even say it's the city. It's basically the American embassy plus some buildings, I suppose, the old palaces and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
You get there and you're like, I don't have a lot of elbow room. I thought I'd have a little bit more through here.
Yeah. I thought there'd be more space. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I spoke to my friends about it in Guyana. Okay. We were playing a game, all right, where you have to go to each country beginning with a letter of the alphabet. So A is Australia, B, Belgium, C, Canada, G for Guyana, right? At the time, there was no official designated country beginning with the letter W, right?
Right.
So there are now. While I was a hostage, they created one, but at the time it didn't exist. So I proposed maybe W could be a war zone.
Oh my God.
Right? So my friends came back. So there's a chairman of this game, right? This is serious stuff. There's a chairman that leads this. And what the message came back to me was that if you are stupid enough to go to Iraq, something happens and you talk about Guyana, they will give me the W for war zone. That was the main reason I went.
I kind of like how young, not adolescent, but young men and young women are kind of the same everywhere, right? Where we have a lot of drinking games or dumb ideas, right? That, maybe I'm going to go out on a limb here. Was this game developed in a pub or over a pub conversation at some point, right? That kind of matriculated into something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, that's the way it went. And, there's a lot of rules associated with it because obviously there's no country beginning with X. So X is 10 countries beginning with the same letter sort of thing. So, yeah. So there's a couple of annoying knock-on effects. Obviously, we know what happened to me when we'll go into more detail. But after I did get out, my friends disqualified me from the game for taking it too seriously. I mean, you've got to be in it to win it. You know what I mean?
And you were pot committed, right? You're like, I am going to take this. Not only am I going to visit, I'm going to live in these two countries for a couple of years against my will, but I will live there.
That's right. Yeah. So that happened. And of course, annoyingly, while I was a hostage, the UN created the country of Western Sahara on the northwestern part of Africa. So my whole thing fell apart.
Could have avoided all of this whole mess.
Like,
just a little bit of patience in there, and you would have gotten Western Sahara, you've been fine.
Yeah. My other thought was I could invade and make my own country. Look at, Western Peatland or something. But, that's really expensive trying to get your own private army.
And you had student loans that you needed to work through, so you couldn't incur any more debt.
Absolutely, yeah. So, man, so I still don't have the W. So, yeah.
I think that I don't know. We'll see if we can, leave it up to the comments, right? I don't know. I think if you're looking for a moral support on giving you the W, I think that you get the W. I think that like I can't wait to get through this. Like I appreciate you kind of sharing that, with us. It's a hard thing to talk about, right? Because you don't ever want to like look back and be like, oh man, I made a stupid decision or whatever it is. Like there was no way to know, right? And you were kind of told that again, the green zone was supposed to be pretty safe as far as everything goes within that region. So, okay, so take me through. So you get to Iraq in, you said April of 2007.
Yeah, so I arrive in. So there's a couple of steps to get to Iraq. So remember, I'm in Guyana. So Georgetown, Guyana is the capital city. So that's where I am, Georgetown,
So you
Guyana.
took this contract while you were in Guyana?
Right. So I've got to get from Georgetown, Guyana to Baghdad, Iraq. Shockingly, that's not a standard flight route. No. So I fly from Georgetown, Guyana to somewhere in Florida. Where did I fly to? Florida. I'm sure it's
probably
Florida.
Atlanta. Atlanta's a huge hub for us.
Yeah. So I land there. I get to US immigration from Guyana, which is obviously a major drug shipment country, one male on their own. Of course, I want to know what I'm doing. I'm like, well, here's the gig. I'm flying to Baghdad. that little
How
red
long were
light
you
on-
incarcerated? Yeah, right. You were like in an immigrations and customs guy. They're like, you're on a training video somewhere, right? Like on outlandish stories, like someone is talking about you, right? Like this guy's coming from this location, right? And he says he's going to Baghdad. We definitely have to check this guy out for drugs for sure.
Yeah. So, the little red light goes on top of the cubicle, we get escorted off into this room.
You're like, I saw that coming.
Yeah. So I'm sat in this room for hours and there's all sorts of people. You can imagine what it's like. There's, clearly Mexican drug cartel people, I don't know, whatever, terrorists, all sorts of people, I'm sat here like, and I must have been in this room for like 3 hours or something like that. Eventually, this immigration officer comes to speak to me. I get taken into this private one-on-one booth, tell me your story. I had letters from the company, so it wasn't like a complete blag. And the company wanted me to go to their head office in DC for 2 days for like training before going to Baghdad. So it was all a bit kind of weird, So anyway, I tell my story. I explain the story of what I'm doing, where I've been, what I'm going to, and all the rest of it. And at the end of it, the guy says, "Well, actually, just because you're flying from Guyana to Baghdad, that's not illegal or anything like that." He's like, "It's odd, but it's not illegal."
I don't know that route has been flown before. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, "Well, stamp my passport, happy days, see you in DC," sort of thing. Yeah. By the way, can you repack your bag that we've just unpacked and had a dog sniffer over and everything? So I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." So thanks, bye. Yeah. So get on a plane to DC, go to DC for 2 days. Remember as well, again, so they've put me in a hotel and this sort of stuff. You got to remember, I've been living in the tropics of Guyana for the previous 3-4 years. So, just stupid stuff. Like Guyana doesn't have hot running water because it's quite a warm country. So the water warms up in the pipe. So I'm in the hotel in DC. So I thought, I'll have a shower. I forgot. Of course, you got hot and cold water. I would burn myself to death. I was like, stupid stuff like that. So anyway, I spent 2 days in DC going through all sorts of weird stuff, and they, we do various bits of training and all that sort of thing. And they prepped me to go to Baghdad via Jordan. So I get on the plane from DC. I'm on my own. I get to Jordan. Of course, some paperwork's not valid. I can't get through. So I'm stuck there for 24 hours. The person behind me who I was working with, who should have met me in Baghdad, of course, meets me in Jordan the next day, and they're all clear, and there's a fixer at this point arrived to try and sort it all out. So
Good.
that was fine. There was basically, again, it was to do with the fact I was flying from South America to Jordan. It's like, who are you? Why are you doing this? Sort of thing. So anyway, that all gets ironed out by this fixer. So we're flying from Jordan to Baghdad. It's quite a short route. And I'm sat next to a South African security guy. And I said, I've never been to Iraq before, all this sort of stuff. He said to me, just be mindful, that the landing might be a bit rough because they don't sort of circle around. The plane just like, sort of thing. So I was like, okay, I can hack that. I've been on a roller coaster, all of a sudden the plane just like
banks down. Yeah. Because they have to
Oh.
go from an altitude that's like a safe kind of altitude and then like barrel down to try to minimize any kind of surface to air missile threat. Yeah. Welcome to Iraq, right? You're in a war zone now.
Yeah. So I just thought, I'm going to plane crash sort of thing, Anyway, so we land. And I walk down the steps onto the runway. And as I'm walking down the steps, I see this like missile just fly from the edge and land on the edge of the airport, and this plume of smoke appear, just like boom. I thought, great, welcome to Iraq,
Yeah, this is not the it's again, there's a lot of like, I'm sure that, hindsight being what it is, right, that you can look and be like, man, there was a lot of warning signs that this was not going to be as luxurious as they had advertised.
Yeah. And, and also as well, just for the record, this definitely wasn't the islands, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully you read contracts a little closer, for now.
Do now. Yeah. So we walk into Baghdad immigration, and the guy with me, he's like straight through, no problem there. Of course, my passport's got 60 million stamps in it from Brazil, Ecuador, whatever, all these sort of places. And of course, I've been through the US all within the space of a week,
Yeah.
So all sorts of questions and stuff. Again, fortunately, there was a fixer there. I actually thought they were going to send me back to Jordan. But anyway, after a couple of hours, they let us all through. And with that, I met up with my security team who were going to drive me from the airport to the green zone. And it's strange what you think, they sort of gave us a bit of a briefing, and they said, we're going to go in these low profile cars. So they just look like normal cars, but they're armored. They're like diplomatic vehicles, I suppose, that kind of style. And they said to me, put this bulletproof vest on. So I'm like, yeah, right. Oh, they're heavy, aren't they? Flaming heck. Right, I put that on. I was like, geez.
Quite familiar.
Right, yeah, sure. So I put that on and sort of trundle to the car door. And I go to open the car door. I'm like, geez, these hinges are stiff on this door. Maybe they need to put, WD-40. They need to put some WD-40 on the hinges. And of course, it's not. It's because it's bulletproof, isn't it? It's like packed with bulletproof lining. It's just a really heavy door. So, so all that was a bit weird. And then as we're driving down there, at the time, that road was like the most dangerous road in Iraq, from the airport to the green zone. And as we're driving along, I just see a load of army military in the middle of the main highway, sort of surrounding a load of, I guess, Iraqis that were sat down. Clearly they were under arrest and been rounded up. And I just thought, oh, great, Yeah.
So this has got to be total culture shock from you. I mean, now I know that you got held up on literally every customs and immigration checkpoint you could along the way. But within, I don't know, 7 to 10 days, you went from, northern tip of South America, right? Like you said, probably heavy indigenous culture, very, jungles, right? No running water or no hot running water. Flying through the United States. I mean, your mind must have, so you flew through the United States up to DC, eventually over to Jordan, and then into Iraq. And then all of a sudden you're seeing people, you're like, US military, gunpoint, Iraqis on the ground getting arrested. What was going through your mind, through this whole thing? Because this is a totally different, I mean, you are now literally on the other side of the world, but also figuratively.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it was a bit like, this is a bit more dangerous than I really thought it was going to be. I'd seen it on the news, but this was something else. Everyone was carrying rifles, machine guns. There was all sorts of different uniforms, military vehicles, tanks, or just, it was almost like a scene out of a war movie, that sort of thing. It
and
was
it becomes
really, really
super
strange.
personal, right? I mean, because I think that sometimes we can disassociate. We see it on a television or a computer screen. We almost disassociate. And now all of a sudden, like you're saying, you're like, and that's right there, right? This is happening, in front of me. Interesting. I've always wondered, because again, you're a civilian. So as a military guy, this is why it's so interesting to me. Military guy, I go through, months and years of, inculcation into a culture of what to expect and how to see in war and war and war. You're like straight up civilian. You get 2 days of somewhat of maybe some PowerPoint briefs, right? And then now you're all of a sudden here, right? Wow, what a culture shock.
Yeah, so it was a bit strange. I mean, even being in DC was a bit of a shock to the system to me. I'd forgot things like how busy cars were. In Guyana, there's not many cars in the jungle, so you just walk along the road. I forgot you can't do that in DC, can you? They run you down. Just weird stuff like that. So yeah, it was definitely much more dangerous than I thought. A bit of a funny anecdote, though, I'll tell you. So as we're driving into the Green Zone, which is the old Saddam Hussein Palace sort of area, I'm looking at the trees, right? You would have seen these being in Iraq. They're palm trees, right?
Yeah.
So we have Guyana has palm trees, tons of them.
Huh.
So I'm like, coconuts? You grow coconuts in Iraq? Like, no, they're dates.
Those are date palms.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How funny.
Yeah.
How funny.
Oh, man.
And again, like this is the association, because your mind immediately goes to recognize what it does, what it knows. And you're like, oh, coconut, wait a second. And then you have to go and override it, right? To be able to say, that's not a thing here.
It was crazy. I mean, when they said it was dates, I was like, oh, of course it is. Yeah, But they looked at me a bit stupid. It's like, why would you think they were coconuts? I was like, well, why would you not?
I guess that's really smart, actually. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. So they then drove me into the Green Zone, and I couldn't really do very much. So I was stuck to the compound. I had to get IDs and things like that. So the next sort of week was spent having security training. So the big security training at the time was about when you're in a convoy of two vehicles, what to do if one of the vehicles gets hit by an IED or is held up, shot at by a rogue checkpoint. So how do we move from one vehicle to the other? That was the big thing: rogue checkpoints and IEDs.
What was the plan? So so you do have military, private contractors. I'll just say private contractors.
Yes, they're private contractors, correct. And we're using these low-profile vehicles, so they look like normal vehicles, but they're armored. They're especially built BMWs, Mercedes, that sort of thing.
Okay, so now you're on your first convoy, right? And you're seeing, like, you are like introduced to the fact that you're in a war zone very, very quickly.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So we're driving down this road into the Green Zone, and I see the coconut trees that are not. And we pull into my compound where I'm staying, and I'm just met with a couple of people, like my line manager, I suppose, and the head of security. And initially, I arrived like, I don't know, 6 p.m. or something like that, Iraqi time. Bearing in mind, I've been traveling for the last week, sort of thing. So just went to the canteen, I seem to recall, which was a whole, again, you know what these military canteens are like. I'm not, it was just this, I was amazed. It was like a full kind of restaurant sort of thing. I wasn't expecting anything like that at all.
That was not my experience. Don't worry. I was a very different experience. Okay. Yeah, no. They never let, I was a grunt, right? They never let us into those places.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well, I'll tell you, right, it was amazing. It was all canteen containers, but it was massive. They had everything that you ever wanted, sort of thing. So, I think on that first day, I just got some food and sort of went to sleep, basically.
If I may, so it seems very, so when I was in Afghanistan, we had Camp Leatherneck and then Camp Bastion. And so Bastion was the kind of like, one, our airfield was on Bastion, but two, it was primarily a British camp. And that's where I would say NATO, a lot of NATO was there. And so you had a lot of like different forces there. And then you come over to Leatherneck, which was the Marine camp. And we would like we had when I was over at the recon companies and I was in Afghanistan, we had like little like dune buggy type things, right? And we would
Right.
take these and drive all the way over to Bastion because their chow hall, right, or they had like a coffee shop, right? So we would like a tractor trailer with a little coffee shop out there, and then they had a British PX, right? And so we would get
Right.
like
Yeah.
British snacks. And then we go over to Americans and it was all like dumpy and like people would yell at you all the time. So any chance that we could, we'd go over to the NATO side because it was just, I don't know, they had a way of focusing towards like troop morale through like being in the rear and taking
Right.
care of them in a different way. And so that's what I imagine for me being the green, with the green zone is like it's like all these private contractors, IT professionals, State Department, whatever,
Yeah.
all kind of coming into the common place to kind of grab food before they go out on whatever they're supposed to do. The Marine side was always very like cut and dry. And so I do have some concept of what you're talking about, and it sounds like it would be kind of a cool place to hang, right?
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, is regardless of where you're at, I guess.
Yeah, it was all right. So my company had its own sort of restaurant, all the rest of it. So we didn't mix too much with the Americans, but there was a PX that had restaurants in there, had coffee shop, supermarket. You could buy a Harley Davidson, I seem to recall. Yeah,
Yeah.
some other weirdo stuff. Oh, that's right. They didn't take coins. They had like cardboard
Pogs.
discs. Yeah,
Pogs, yeah. Some
pogs. That's right. Yeah.
AFES is American Armed Forces Exchange
That's right.
Network,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. And
So
it's because they didn't actually. It was actually to deter gambling,
really?
and so
Oh,
cash wasn't a currency. Dollars weren't a currency. You had like these little pogs. That
yeah,
was like
that's
the
right.
currency. Yeah, yeah. It was to
Yeah,
deter. It was basically to deter gambling.
yeah, I got you. So yeah, so we had to use those. So I remember now. So it's all coming back to me. So my first
Yeah.
real day in Iraq, um, we were still allowed to walk around the green zone at that time when I first arrived. Um, so one of the things that they introduced me to very quickly was what did you call it? CRAM? Is it called CRAM? So when a missile comes in, it sounds an alarm and all the rest of it. Is that called its CRAM system?
I don't know the specific term, but yeah.
Yeah, so I like they were telling me that what happens is that this alarm system goes off. It was an American because the green zone was predominantly the American embassy, and the big underlying joke was the Americans were building this massive new embassy, but apparently they'd been building this massive new embassy for I don't know whatever the last 20 years or something. You know what I mean? So it was a bit of a jokey myth about it, but they had this missile protection dome thing. So they were telling me about it, and they said that over the time it got more and more common. And just as they were explaining it to me, the alarm went off, and a missile landed somewhere. And I mean, you could feel it. I'd never experienced anything like it. It was like a bang, and then you could feel the ground shake. I don't know
And
what
this
it
is
was.
your
Like a
first or second day.
first. Well, it's my. So I arrived at 6 p.m. This is my first full day. So
And someone's
yeah,
literally explaining, hey, we get rocketed a lot, right? This and that, and you're going to hear an alarm, and they're like, and then on cue, right? It's like
yeah,
it starts going off, and then a rocket lands. Oh my gosh!
yeah. So yeah, it was mad. But then they said to me, "Well, don't worry about it," because they said it happened quite regularly. But they also said there's a lot of false alarms. Now, to be fair, all the time I was there, I didn't encounter a false alarm. Though it happened, and there was always something went on. Um, but they said, "Well, don't worry about it. Let's go for breakfast in the PX." Okay, so they said we can still walk around the green zone, but you got to wear your body armor, all right? And they said, "Don't worry about these missiles. They happen all the time. They're really inaccurate. Barely cause any damage, except all this story." Okay, so great. So we walk into the PX, no problem. My first encounter, of course, I've got no money, have I? So I can't do anything. I have to sort out these cardboard things that,
Mm.
change it. It was really weird. I had US dollars, but I couldn't use US dollars. I had to change the US dollars for cardboard stuff to buy things from an American shop. But anyway, as we're walking in to the PX, it's got like a sandbag wall around it, I guess. And, and I kept watching these soldier people kind of like, I couldn't quite work out what they were doing at first. They were kind of like putting their hand in the pocket and putting the hand inside this metal tub of sand and then putting the hand back in the pocket again. And I had to observe it a few times. They were taking their gun out, putting it in this, like, I don't know, container of sand and firing it and putting it back. And I was like, what are they doing? And apparently they have to show it's discharged or something. So
It's
yeah.
called a clearing barrel.
Right. Okay.
It's called a clearing barrel. So the justification behind a clearing barrel is that when you're going into a common space, what you do is you have this bullet. It's called a bullet trap, and it's there's depending on how different variants of it, but basically what you do is you unload your weapon system, and then you put your weapon system inside of the barrel, and you pull the trigger to identify that it is, to like a final check that it is clear. Now there's a number of different ways you can do it, but this is like the most common thing. So people would clear their weapon system or their their rifle or their pistol before going into the PX, and it was like a big common thing because, or a kind of a hot button issue, because a lot of the frontline troops, we just always carried what we would consider a condition one weapon system, always ready to go, always ready to
Right.
get into a gunfight, because that's how we're kind of conditioned. But then you come back to this place, it was very hard for us because we would come back to places like that. They'd be like, you got to clear your weapon. And you're like, I never do that. Right. Like I live in the red zone. I'm never going to make sure, I'm never going to take, I'm never going to remove my best opportunity for, to survive in a gunfight. And they're like, well, to come in the chow hall, you need to do that. And you're like, all right, like, I just want a sandwich, dude. Right. So there's all these weird rules in place, right? Inside of it. Yeah. It's interesting. And again, if it's not explained to you what they're doing, again, that's so crazy. You're like a total civilian watching all these very common military customs and cultures happen, but you're having to learn them in real time.
Yeah. And all the acronyms as well. So in the PX, there's just a ton of different people. There's loads of people in all sorts of different uniforms. I don't know, Filipinos, Gurkhas, Indians, whatever. They're all like, it just looks like something out of a Star Wars movie. Just tons of different factions of people.
And you call it a cantina, which totally makes sense, right?
Yeah. It was just crazy. And then, of course, so eventually I sorted out the buying of the breakfast thing. I get the gist of that. And then, of course, I stand in line to pay, but I didn't realize there's different lines depending on the color of your pouch ID badge and all that. So military personnel get priority on one line. I don't know, whatever. Someone else gets another, whatever. I get these other things. I have no idea what's going on. I just follow the guy in front. That's what I did. Like,
I've been doing that for 20 years. That's basically what I did for my entire career, is follow the guy in front of me, right?
And then, of course, I get there and then whatever, it's $2.50. All I got is a load of cardboard. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, yeah.
So your first 24 hours in Iraq, you've seen a military convoy, having, presumably Iraqis, right, being detained for some reason on your way in. You've had to put on bulletproof vests. You've been explained what a rocket attack is. You've had a rocket attack. You've had to convert your American currency into these pogs, cardboard currency, and figure out how to get fed, all in this time frame of your first 24 hours. What was going through your head? I mean, you're like, you had to have been swimming in like, did I make a terrible mistake through this?
I mean, I in the back of my mind, on one side, I'm thinking, I wanted a unique cultural experience, and this is what I'm getting. Shut up, suck it up, kind of thing. On the other, I'm thinking, well, at least I'm going to get my W. and then sort of on the other, I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? Kind of thing. And then, of course, I can't even remember where I sat eating this breakfast. It was at a table somewhere outside or whatever. And, there's military guys from all over the place. They could have been speaking a foreign language to me. They're asking me about, to operate from an FOB and as XYZ, a TSG. I'm like, what? I have no idea what you're going on about. Anyway, so we have the breakfast and we decide to start walking back. And as we're walking back, the alarm, this missile alarm goes. So the guy I'm with has been there for a few years. He was ex-military and fell into the private contracting sector of IT and all the rest of it. He said, we need to stand under this concrete bush shelter is the best way I can describe it. I think it was called a duck and cover shelter.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, whatever. So of course this thing's about this high. So I'm like, I have to duck right down.
It's like a U-shaped concrete like 6 inches to a foot thick,
Yeah.
right, U-shaped thing, and then you just
And
have to sit there.
Yeah, and it's all the only thing protecting each end is just like a lump of concrete at each end, like a
Mhm.
slab of it.
Mhm.
And he said, "We'll be safe in here." I'm like,
Mm-mm.
I don't feel very, I don't feel very safe in here, you know. And he said, "Don't worry about it. You know, it's probably a false alarm." The moment he said that, all I saw was this massive explosion in the car park of the PX, just a ton of dust fly all over the
Oh
place.
my god.
Um, and like, bits of vehicle and all the rest of it. So, um, and so it was a bit like a movie, where after about 3 or 4 minutes, bits of dust kind of blew on me, in this duck and cover shelter, as it moved out, as it sort of disseminated out.
Yeah, welcome to Iraq.
Yeah, this guy's calm as hell. He's on the radio. He's like, "Yeah, I'm with Pete. We're in the duck and cover shelter. Yeah, we're all right. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Half the car park's disappeared." Yeah,
A week
like,
ago, I was in the
yeah,
Amazon, right? You're like,
yeah.
what is happening?
I know. My biggest fear a week ago was getting bitten by a mosquito. Now I'm
Yep.
having missiles dropped on my head. Bearing in mind this is still on day one of being there, where I've been told, "Don't worry about the sirens, they're mainly false alarms." Like, we've been here twice at this point.
I feel like I've been lied
Yeah.
to.
So, and I mean, I don't know what the injury count was on that, but people would have been injured. I said to the guy, "That's hit vehicles and stuff. People would have been injured there." He's like, "Oh yeah, that's a really serious hit. That's the worst I've ever known." I'm like, "Great," sort of thing.
Super.
So yeah, so we hung around in this duck and cover shelter for quite a while. I mean, it seemed like an hour, probably, I don't know, 30 minutes. And then he's sort of like, "Okay, let's just walk back." I'm like, "What is that? Hey," yeah, is that what you do?
That's the weirdest
Yeah.
part about those kind of things. And I've been in those where first is like the thing happens, the alarm goes off, everybody's scrambling to get under this thing. And it's this kind of, it's an interesting, a lot of people call it like gallows humor, right?
Uh-huh.
Is people, you just meet all the randomest of people because you're all equal at that point, right? You're just trying not to
Sure.
get blown up and you're hanging out under this like concrete barrier. And then you just strike up conversations. I remember like smoking like random cigarettes with people and like just having like, "Hey, where are you from?"
Yeah.
There's like the new guy who's freaking out and you look over and you're like, "First time, huh?" Right? Kind of.
Yeah. Man. It's just manic, crazy stuff like that. I remember that, to be fair, the guy gave me some really good advice. He said to me, "If you ever hear bullets bang, don't worry about it." He says, "It's when you hear the whiz that you need to worry about it." And that, moving forward, when I was a hostage, was the best advice he gave me. So yeah,
Wow,
that was
and it's
quite
so
interesting.
true. It's
Yeah.
also spoken like a guy who's been in a couple of gunfights.
I
Who,
suspect
yeah,
so. I
yeah,
didn't grill him too much at that point. I was just like, I had no idea where we were, where we were going. I couldn't, I wouldn't even have been able to have found my way back on my own at
yeah.
this point. You know what I mean? So, yeah, so that is basically the process for the next couple of weeks. I'm stuck in this rigmarole of trying to get permits to go to the red zone, to where the Ministry of Finance was based. So
Mhm.
my job, I was based in the green zone, but my work was in the Ministry of Finance data center, which was actually part of the University of Baghdad and was based in the red zone. Now, in order to do that, I had to get like another, the pouch with the ID badges on. I had to get another type of ID to transition from the green to the red zone. So we had to go to this in the green zone. We had to go to this like official um, government department, I guess, that was ran by the Americans, basically. So I get there, and of course, they want two forms of ID. So I couldn't believe it. So they wanted some photos. So I had my passport. That was fine. And of course, they took the passport. 60 million stamps in the thing. The whole story goes off again, right? Yeah. Well,
You're back in the customs loop again,
yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah, it's just like whatever. And then they're like, "Do you have a second form of photo ID?" The only second form of photo ID I had on me was my Guyana driving license. I was like, of all the places where someone's going to accept a Guyana driving license, is the middle of Baghdad. I was just like, this is mad. So, so I gave him the Guyana driving license, and he gave me my passport back and held on to the Guyana driving license while the ID was being printed. He's like, you collect this on the way out. I'm like, well, what do I do with my passport? He's like, you put it in your pocket. I was like, oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, okay,
yeah. You know, yeah. Sometimes you need people to state the obvious in those situations.
I get it. I'm the same way. Sometimes I just need a little bit of help getting through some stressful situations. I get it.
So and I went into this room and had photos taken and fingerprints and all the rest of it, and sat around for about 5 hours. And I thought, well, I'm never going to get this guy on a driving license back. Eventually I come out with this, green zone, red zone ID badges, great. And as I'm walking out, the guy sort of taps me on the shoulder. He goes, "Oh, here's your guy on a driving license," sort of thing. I was like, "Oh, great." And it's just like, what was the point of that? And like, why did you? I don't understand. Just crazy stuff. So I go back with these permits now. There's something really important I can do with these permits, I was informed. And so we tested it out. And that was I could go to the American Embassy back compound and swim in the swimming pool and get free pop.
The real reason why you get that.
I did that. That was good. And then I started. So some of the Iraqis were in our compound as well. Some of the computer IT Iraqis would come into our green zone. So I was working with them in the green zone. But then obviously, the real work started once I'd got those permits. I was able to go to the red zone. Now, the Ministry of Finance data center, I'd been told, was a really nice place. It's part of the University of Baghdad. Excuse me. There's grass. It's nice. And there's not many people there, right? Sounds good. Until the day I'm due to go, the Iraqi army intercepted a truck bomb. And they got it, right? They got the truck bomb, no problem. They drive the truck bomb to the edge of Baghdad, to somewhere near the main Ministry of Finance building, which was like this massive building, 10 stories high. And they undertake a controlled explosion.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately, they got it wrong and blew out most of the windows in the main Ministry of Finance building.
The very first day that you're there.
Yeah. So now, unbeknown to me and my security team, was that all these Ministry of Finance workers now, from these 10 floors of building, were transferred to these 2 rooms at the Ministry of Finance data center in the University of Baghdad. I turn up for my first day. There are, I don't know, 200 people in this single story building. It is rammed. I have no idea what's going on. The security team are like, we have no idea what's going on, sort of thing. So we kind of push our way through and find another British guy who was working on the sort of hardware side of it. And we like introduce each other. He's like, oh, they did this controlled bomb at the main Ministry of Finance building, so everyone's had to move here now. I'm like, crikey, this is crazy.
God.
So my job was to train a team of Iraqi programmers to develop reports to produce spending financial information from the system. So these programmers have been shunted into this really small cupboard, no electricity, so they couldn't turn the computers on, could they? So So I've got to train these in how to use a computer system without any computers. So what we agree is that we can use 3 computers in this larger training office, which has now been overtaken by about 50 other Iraqis from the Ministry of Finance. So you can imagine the noise and hassle and all that sort of thing. So I'm trying to
then 50 people cramped into a tiny space, all trying to talk over each other. Oh my goodness.
There was another trainer in the room as well, trying to train this other group of Iraqis on the finance system, and then you got the workers sort of trying to do their jobs. There's probably 2 or 3 teams of them.
Chaos, absolute chaos.
Yeah, just like ridiculous. So that went on for a few weeks. Nothing, just for information, nothing really exciting happened between that and sort of 4 or 5 weeks, right, at this point. So
you're kind of trying to almost like unravel this system and trying, okay, everything is kind of chaotic right now. We're trying to wrap our arms around this thing and kind of get the reason why you're there is to help train this, this Ministry of Finance on being able to, data track and analyze
Yeah.
troves of information, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I forgot to say something as well. I was working for this company called Bearing Point, which
Mhm.
it's sort of been portrayed to me as this private sector company that was part of the rebuilding of Iraq and all that sort of thing. So in my mind, really, with the job, I should have said this actually. I felt it was a little bit of progression from being an international volunteer to being like a consultant. It was like a step up. It was like
Okay.
recognition of that doing that work. Unbeknown to me, when I arrived in Iraq, I think on the second day, they were doing a briefing on what Bearing Point do in Iraq, and evidently they supplied staff to the CIA, which I didn't know that.
Like
So,
what?
yeah, yeah, it was a bit like that. I was a bit like, okie dokie. And the only reason I sort of found it out was purely by accident. So I was in a vehicle, might have been going to the PX or something, but we were supposed to drop someone else off, this American guy. But I couldn't go there because I wasn't security cleared to go into the CIA compound. So it
Oh
was
my
all a bit,
gosh.
yeah. So I kind of had to stand outside twiddling my thumbs, while they drop this guy off, sort of thing. I was like, oh, okay.
You realize
So
that you're in this like intricate web. That was the thing, was like Iraq was a web of a lot of different
yeah,
agencies, a lot of different people. Nation building is not something that's very easily done, and there's a lot of I wouldn't say competing interests, but I would say interconnected interests, but that also have their own objectives, and so at times that can be quite frustrating to deal with and manage.
yeah, there was a lot of balancing. I mean, I like all competing. Like my mind, like everyone wanted this data from the Ministry of Finance system. It'd been installed 3-4 years, and there was no data coming out of it. So everyone wanted to know who was spending what where. Really, that's what it boiled down to. And
Yeah.
so I had the US aid on my back say, we want the data first. My manager was like, you give us the data first. Everyone wanted this data first. The reality is, it was me that was going to get the data first. That was,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then probably my manager might get it next. You know what I mean? That sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So it was quite interesting how they were kind of doing that. But I was like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I've been here 2 days. Give me I'm doing it. I'm doing it, sort of thing. So yeah, well, so my job. So when I got there, my job was, I thought, train the programming team. They can extract the data rather than me doing it. It's
Mhm.
better that they
Mhm.
do it. So in this training room, I sort of battled my way around all the PCs, and I installed reporting software, Crystal
Mhm.
Reports. I don't know, you may have heard of it. It's
Mm-mm.
just a piece of reporting software that sits on top of a database, and you just collate all the data, and it brings it out in nice graphs and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
So I thought that would be the easiest way to do the reporting. The license had been bought for it and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so park that, because we come back to that later. So, I've installed this reporting software, okay? And that's what I start training them in. Things things normalize, I suppose, over the next month or so. So, I've been there
As much
from
as they
April.
can be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Things start becoming routine. I've been there from April the 2nd to May the 29th. Missiles have been flown over. We'd had a few close hits. One had sort of hit the compound, but we were in like these oh, yeah. Again, everyone said, "Are you in these bomb-proof buildings?" Now, I didn't. In my mind, I don't know what a bomb-proof building looked like, but it definitely
Right.
wasn't what I saw. So, in my mind, a bomb-proof building is like, a massive concrete house with super reinforced walls or something. I don't know. What I had was, these temporary building huts that are made of like plywood, on building
Mhm.
sites. Okay. And
Mhm.
then they had metal frames around them with sandbags on top of the metal frames.
Yep.
That was
We
the
call them
reinforcement.
a lot of times we'll do like what's called a HESCO barrier,
Okay.
where they have like these big metal cage. They're basically giant sandbags. So you have like a
Yeah.
metal framed kind of like almost like a metal mesh, and then they have
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
burlap bag inside of it, and they fill that with sand.
Right.
And those are blast protectives at some degree.
Yeah. That isn't what I envisaged. I was expecting something more.
Reinforced concrete, right? Like all
Yeah.
this. Yeah. No,
They
no.
they did say to me they did say to me around the edge they had those T walls, the
Mhm,
concrete T, the big basin it stood up right. Um,
mhm.
that didn't fill me with confidence really. I mean,
No.
they look like they sort of would blow over quite easily.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. you know. So yeah. So anyway, that's the condition we were sleeping in. That was fine. So we had another missile come in closer to our compound, and it didn't hit the building, but it obviously hit the ground, and it caused all the shelving and stuff to fall off inside this this
My goodness.
bomb-proof building. So yeah, so that was the sort of excitement that was going on. And I ate some dates from the coconut trees. That was quite nice. And I'd been doing restaurant. And I tell you what I was doing as well. I was doing my 10,000 steps wearing my body armor. So
getting some good exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't as super fit as you guys, but I was fitter. That's for sure. Things weren't so bad. So I guess let's get to the day of it, I suppose. So
I mean, your first month in country sounds, hectic to say the least, right? Again, like we've talked about the culture shock of what you expected, what you were kind of, I don't know, told about what you'd see, and then the realities of it. It is an active war zone, and then there are active participants in that all across that. And it seems like you were, trying to wade through that as best you could to accomplish your mission and see what you could to, do what you were set there to do, and kind of get some specific, Ministry of Finance data. So kind of take me through, really the reason why you're here, right, is the fateful day of May 29th. What was that day like? Can you take me through, did anything feel different, right? What was the morning like? Did you have a sense of something that was different going on? And then kind of take me through the events themselves as they kind of unfolded.
So the actual morning wasn't too different from any other day when we did it. So I went to the security room, but I went to our canteen, had breakfast, that sort of thing. And then I went to the security room about 8 a.m., something like that. And I got my bulletproof vest, which had a massive number 13 on it. And I was told I could black that out. But, I thought having 13 on there's got to be lucky, right? So well, the way we worked was we put the bulletproof vest on over our normal clothes, and then we put an overshirt over the top so that they couldn't see we was wearing a bulletproof vest, or tried to eliminate it from that sort of thing. And with that, I got in the car and we had a quick briefing. So I did that, and just as I was about to go, somebody said, "Oh, there's some post for you," and so I opened up the post, and it was a video that I'd ordered, a DVD, The Long Way Down. It's a motorcycle documentary, right?
No way. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So what I did was I got the DVD, and I said, I'll just drop this back in my apartment. I'll watch it when I get back tonight. So I did that, got back in the car, and off we drove, yeah?
Oh, famous last words.
Yeah, come back to it. We'll come back to it. So I did that. And then as we drove out of the green zone, I remember thinking, crikey, there's a lot of Iraqi police outside the green zone. That's not normal. And I didn't say anything about it because we've been told the protocol was do not speak with the security team, right? We're just the principal, as they called us. We weren't even the client, right? So the protocol was not to talk to them. So I didn't think, I was like, okay, looks odd, but I'll just ignore that. And as we was driving along, so the journey's about half an hour, something like that. And we're driving along, and we get to the Ministry of Energy, I think it was, the electricity department, where they produce the electricity. And we pulled in and stopped. And that was not normal. And I leant forward and I said, is everything okay? And they said, yeah, we've lost radio contact with the car behind us. It must be a blackout area. And I didn't think too much of it. But as the car behind us got closer, the radio came back into play again. And they're like, yeah, we've got comms. Let's carry on. I thought, that's a bit weird. Anyway, we get to the Ministry of Finance data center at the University of Baghdad. And there's a bit of a protocol of who gets out first and all this sort of thing and how we get in there. One of the security guards gets out first. They open the door for us to make once it's clear, etc., etc. So that's all fine. So I go into the Ministry of Finance. I go to the room where I'm normally teaching, and it's all good. It's all okay. I meet up with my programming team. There's also another 50 odd people in there doing all sorts of different stuff. There's another trainer in there again and all this sort of stuff. So I start doing some training, and we'd known about a problem with the microwave link on the roof. On the Ministry of Finance from the data center back to the Ministry of Finance that had its windows blowing out. There was a problem with the microwave link, right?
Okay.
So they were slowly getting this Ministry of Finance building back up to speed. So they wanted us to go and check the microwave link on top of the roof. And so, I mean, as an IT person, I'm okay doing that. But it all went a bit wonky because there's two of us there. There's a guy next door, and then there's me going up on the roof. So it's like what security stays with who, where, sort of thing, you know. So anyway, I go up with one security guy, and I kind of go up on the roof. And of course, first time in anything like this, I'm like, wow, look at this view. It's like, for God's sake, kneel down, right? You're going to get shot. I'm like, oh, okay.
Damn tourist, right?
Yeah, it's like, flaming heck, there's snipers all over the place. Like, what are you doing? So I was like, oops, sorry. Yeah. So anyway, we play around with this microwave link. And as we're coming back down the stairs, obviously, because it's the university, there's dormitories to one side of this building. And there's students in the corridor. And as we come down, obviously there's basically a white guy carrying a massive machine gun sort of thing walking down the stairs. And it kind of freaked him out a bit. So I think that might have been where somebody called the police and said, there's foreigners walking around with guns here, sort of thing. It's all a bit weird.
Right. In the college, right? Or in the university.
Yeah, or right next to it. So that's what I think sort of may have alerted them to it. But then about, I don't know, it's about 11:45. So I've been here 2.5 hours at this point. One of the programmers, he was a guy, he was a systems analyst. And he said to me, I just need to go out, excuse me. And he walked off. And that was really weird. The Iraqis are normally quite polite. They don't do that. No one had ever walked out before. And again, I thought that was odd. So he'd been gone about 5-10 minutes, and I'd sort of stopped. I was like, "What do I wait for him to come back? What do I do?" And I was talking to the other programmers about it, like, do we carry on or whatever? And they're like, "We don't know where he's gone. It's really weird, sort of thing." And with that, I heard someone shout, "Get down!" And everyone in my room stood up. So, I learned from working in South America, don't be the odd one out, right?
Yeah.
So I also stood up because in my mind, if I stood up, I'd blend in with all these other Iraqis in this room and not stand out at all, right? Being the only foreigner there and all that kind of thing. And all of a sudden the door opened, and at the end, the door was this guy. Unfortunately, when I stood up, I was right next to the door. So when he opened the door, I was like the first person that he saw. And it was a Ministry of Interior police officer. So in Iraq, each ministry has its own police force.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of look at him. He looks at me. I look at him. He looks at me. He looks at me. It's a bit of a standoff sort of thing. I'm like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "Who are you?" And then he puts a pistol straight to my head. And I think my first reaction was I laughed. And then I put my arms up. And what I noticed more wasn't the pistol pointing at my face. He had a machine gun slung over his arm. And the barrel of the machine gun was pointing right at my groin. And I just thought, I've got my hands up. I just thought, if this machine gun fires, this is really going to hurt, And with that, he said, "Come on." So I'm like, okay. And I thought I'd step outside and I'd see my British security team doing their thing. Whatever that thing is, I expected a thing, right? I've seen Hollywood movies, you all have a bit of a punch up and we all end up going home in time for tea, So I get out of the room and all I can see are all these Iraqi police officers running all over the place. I can't see my security team at all. And I'm led to the entrance of the building and I see the team leader of my British security team surrounded by 5 Iraqis. and one of them's trying to pull his machine gun away, but I couldn't understand what was going on. But then as I got closer, I realized the machine gun, you'll know this, but the machine gun was attached. What I thought at first was like a piece of elastic, but it wasn't. It was like a recoil rope. I don't know what you call it.
Mm-hmm.
So every time they pulled the gun away,
sling.
it kind of recoil. Okay. So, and I was like, oh dear, that's not a good sign, is it? Everyone's shouting at him and all the rest of it. And then all of a sudden, his mobile phone went off, and it was a Nokia, like a Nokia moment. You remember that on the advert? And it was like everyone just sort of stopped and went, oh, what's that? Oh, it's his Nokia phone. And then everything all started again, And it turns out it was our security company trying to contact him. So with that, they did disarm him. And with that, they let us out. And I said to the security team leader, what do we do? I'm expecting some Jean-Claude Van Damme kind of stuff going on.
Come out guns
here.
blazing, right? Shoot everybody, right? Save the day.
Right. You got it. Yeah, that's exactly what I was expecting. And he's like, just do whatever they say. I was like, is that it? Is that the best advice you've got? Yeah.
What? I have a lot of questions, right? What are you doing here? Okay, so hang on. So how many? I know that you couldn't, count the specific numbers, but how many Iraqi police were there? Enough so you had a 4-man British security team, and then you were the only British IT expert at this point?
There was 2 of us. There was one next door, and then there was myself. They missed the guy next door, but we think that's because he had a beer. Oh, no, he'd gone to the toilet. That's what had happened.
Are you serious?
He went to the toilet. Yeah. So he went to the toilet. And of course, all this hoo-ha happened. He came out the toilet, and everyone had got him, basically. So, and then the Iraqi IT team, from what I now understand, is they hid him, and under the false floor in the server room, where they run all the cables, they hid him under there until someone came to get him. So yeah.
So how many Iraqi police, or whoever this was, right, were in the room? Because you have 4 security guys, pretty well armed to the teeth. Enough to get overwhelmed, right? By this force. How many were there?
So there were about 100 Iraqi police officers, and they came in about 20 vehicles. They were real police officers. It transpires they were also militia, but they were real police officers.
Okay.
So yeah, it was all a bit dodgy.
So from a security standpoint, I get why they made the decision of saying, like, there's 4 of us, right, and we're all going to die if we do this, but they're going to overwhelm us. And so, I think the idea of like live to fight another day, figure out what's kind of going on, assess the situation itself, like that's a tough place to be in when you're just massively outnumbered and you're being disarmed. There's not a lot that you can do, other than go out in a blaze of glory, I guess is the other option you can choose. But I don't know that it's easy. I think a lot of people may armchair, and say, well, they should have just, gone out shooting, but it's very difficult to be in that situation, and have to live with that actual decision. So,
sure. I was going to say, knowing what I know now about kidnapping and sort of being involved in hostage survival training, the best option is to comply.
Is to comply with that, right? In that sentence.
Yeah.
Where did you identify the place between where you were being arrested and where you were being abducted, and the difference between?
Right. So at this point, these were Iraqi police officers. They had Iraqi police ID. They said they were Iraqi police. They had Iraqi police vehicles. So at this point, I thought we were under arrest. I thought, my ID badges, I thought it was a document infringement, and that was the problem,
given your history of customs and border patrol, I would imagine that would be kind of par for the course, yeah.
Yeah. So they led us out to these police vehicles, and there was about 20 Iraqi police vehicles with lights on and all the rest of it. Some of them were driving off at this point, put me into the back seat of these vehicles. It was like a Toyota pickup kind of truck.
Hilux.
Yeah, Hilux sort of stuff. Threw the British team leader unceremoniously into the back. All the Iraqis jump in, and we drive off. Lights, sirens going through all the checkpoints automatically. And I still thought we were under arrest. And they took off my ID badge and they passed it to the guy in the front. And I had some money in my pocket, like $400. I had to pay back the Iraqi programmers some expenses for a training course or something like that. And so, I've been in South America. I've dealt with South American police. I know how corruption works here. I'm a bit like stand back, people. I've got this covered.
I've got
Right?
this.
Yeah. Pull out $400. I pass it to the guy in the front, and I went, $1. He looked at it and threw it out the window, and that's when I was like, "Oh, this is an abduction." You know?
Oh,
And then,
no.
yeah, and then with that, they took my shirt off, threw that out the window. They took my steel cap boots off, threw those out the window. And I remember thinking, "Oh, I hope that didn't hit anyone." You know, they took my keys out, threw that out the window, mobile phone out the window. And then the back, they start stripping off the British security guard. They take his shirt off, that goes out the window. They capture his ID badge, they keep that. But then they go to take his trousers off. And for some reason, he's not wearing any underpants. And again, Monty Python, one of these funny sketches, it was very much like that. And I was talking to him. I was like, "Why are you not wearing any underpants?" He's like, "Well, I was at a ex-military. We don't do that." I was like, "Really?" So I'm like, what?
Right. What? Yeah. All this chaos is going on. You are now confirmed that you're being abducted, and you're having a moment with this guy. Be like, "You're not wearing any underwear. Like, why aren't you wearing like?"
Yeah.
So, were you guys able to speak freely? Was the team leader saying things in English to you and kind of talking you and coaching you through this? What was that like?
No, so we were sort of talking, but it was the underpants thing that shocked, because all I was saying was, "What's happening?" He's like, "I don't know," kind of thing. And that was about it. There wasn't much else we could say. The Iraqi next to me was from Kurdistan, so he said, and was talking to me about Manchester Football Club and David Beckham. So, the whole thing was very surreal, I think is probably the term. So, after they threw the money out and I realised it was a reduction, I've got this guy talking to me about Manchester United. And where I'm from is the complete opposite side of the country. So I don't really associate with it, football, very well. And then I've got the guy in the back, not wearing any underwear. It was all a bit weird,
Did they actually throw his pants out? And so now he's just
No,
sitting there.
they pulled his trousers back up.
Okay.
And I was just like, "Well, that's odd." And he's like, "Yeah," and I just turned around and like sort of refocused on what was going on with mine. With me, they pulled.
Where are the other two security personnel?
Well, not sure at this point, but we'll get to that. So
Okay.
they pull my trousers down and throw them out because I'm wearing underwear, right? Because I'm a normal person. I'm
As
not
one does.
Yeah. And they take my shirts off and throw that out. So basically, I'm just in boxer shorts, right? And then we were only traveling for about 10, 15 minutes. And then we stop in the middle of this market. I think it was in the middle of Sadr City, but I'm not sure. And we transfer into this like minibus, and I'm sort of thrown into the back of the minibus. One of the other guards who I hadn't seen was thrown in, and he was handcuffed behind his back, and he was in a lot of pain. I thought he had broke his shoulder. Another guy's thrown in. The other guard that I'd not seen, he got blood running down his face where he'd been hit in the face, and he was handcuffed at the front. And then the two guards that were with me were thrown in. And then a couple of Iraqis jumped in, and we drove off. And it was really hot in the back of this minibus. It was really small. We weren't on the back seat. It was in like the back where they put all the luggage and stuff. And there was a glass window separating us from the back seat. And I was looking at the window, and I just saw this spanner, a wrench, sort of move back and hit the glass. One of the Iraqis smashed the glass to get more air in, I think. But in doing so, the glass shattered all over my leg and down this other guard's back. The guy who I thought had broke his shoulder. All the glass went down his back. It became a bit of a running joke because he had glass in his. So
I know this is a very serious thing, but boy, your British humor and ability to find humor in the worst moments is unparalleled. So I do appreciate of our UK brethren. So thank you for that. But please continue on.
That's all right. So, because of course I didn't know their real names, because they were just security guards I very rarely met. So I didn't know their real names. So we had glass in their, blood in the eye, just stupid stuff like that. One advantage for me was the glass that smashed into my leg. The scar actually formed into like the shape of the UK. So
No
down
way.
the line, it was able to say, "Oh, I'm from here and from there," and all this sort of stuff. So, yeah, that was pretty. So we drive on for another 15 minutes. Oh, there was an Iraqi in there, and I recognized the Iraqi. He looked like the brother of one of the IT Iraqis that I work with in the green zone, and he was wearing a uniform, and it looked. I couldn't quite see him. It was a crease on his shoulder, but it looked like TS, and I assumed that meant translation services. So I said to him, "Do you speak English?" He said, "No." So I was like, "Great." So yeah. And with that, they showed us their police ID badge, Ministry of Interior Police, and the British guards with me said, "Yeah, these Ministry of Interior Police are known for doing abductions. That's what they're famous for. These rogue checkpoints that have been going on, they were known for it." So I was a bit like, "Oh well, not much I can do about it now, is this kind of type thing? Just got to roll with it, I guess." Um, and so we traveled on for only 15 minutes. So we're probably about half an hour into the abduction at this point.
So what's going through your brain? So I mean, like, there's got to be like the initial shock, right? And then there's probably a little bit of panic that sets in, and then potential dread. What are you thinking? I mean, the time frame is, British and American journalists and contractors that are abducted by Al Qaeda and these terrorist networks in Iraq they don't meet very good ends. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
Is that going through your mind?
Yeah. So I just thought, this is Al Qaeda. We're gonna die. That's what I thought. I just thought we're gonna die at some point. The flip side is, at the back of my mind, I was like, look, you came through an adventure, you've got the adventure, suck it up. If you survive it, you're gonna get the W, get a grip on life, right? So um and that's how I could really foresee it. Um, I felt it was very much out of my control, really. There's not a lot I can do at this point. I'm not Rambo. Clearly, Jean-Claude Van Damme isn't going to help me. Special forces aren't going to fly in at any point because they're monitoring this bus. Just sweat it out, see what happens. Just try and make the best of a bad situation, sort of thing. So the bus eventually stops. Again, we're only 30 minutes probably into the abduction at this point. The British guards are let out, and they are, I should point out, they get blindfolded at this point. I'm still wearing my glasses. They come back for me. I'm on my own, and they take my glasses off and throw them away. And they just bind my hands at the front with cloth, very tightly. So they then lead me into this building, and I'm put in a room, and like it's just a house upstairs in a room, and I can see the 4 British guards facing one wall, and I'm sat facing the other. But I can still see. So I can see they're alive. I can see I'm alive. We're all together. And I can hear the British guards talking, are you here? Yeah, I'm here. You're there, all the rest of it. And I'm just sat kind of wondering, what's going to happen next. And I can hear the guy with the broken shoulder who's got glass in his right. Sort of like, ah. And I hear them lift him up and they walk him out the building. And, they're walking him out and I can hear him, his pain fading away. And then there's a gunshot and there's a big debate. Like, I don't know what's happened here, but the British guards are all like, have they killed him? They've just shot him. What does that mean? One of them saying, no, if they shot him in the head, you'd hear a gurgling sound. And then they're like, yeah, but we didn't hear anything else after the gunshot. Did anyone hear the cartridge drop? All this sort of technical stuff about shooting people. And I'm like, I studied IT. That didn't really crop up in my IT modules.
Yeah.
So I'm processing all of this. Like, what does this mean? All the rest of it. And with that, they lifted me up, walked me out the room. They blindfold me at this point, walked me down the stairs. And about halfway down the stairs, they fire a gunshot off behind my back. And then they put me into a car. I guess it was just a tactic to scare us a little bit. I mean, I was terrified. I didn't need the gunshot thing. I was already on the scare factor,
Guys, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm scared. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't need any extra theatrics.
Yeah. So with that, they put me in a car and drove me around for about 10 minutes. And they led me out of the car and they took me into like a basement of the building. But I could hear, and then they sat me down on like a bale of straw. And then I could hear the other British guards coming in, talking to each other. and one of them was talking French. And I later found out that the Iraqi spoke French. We think he might have been Syrian, because that was like a French colony historically. So he was talking French to him, which I thought was quite interesting. And with that, they gave me some food and they gave me water, which I'm told is a good sign under the hostage-taking stakes. At the time, I just thought it was like fattening the pig, ready to slaughter them. So, and we were there we just sat there for probably about over an hour, and I could hear the British guards still speaking to each other. Yeah, I'm here, you're still here. Guy with a broken shoulder.
So all 4 guards have reconvened at this point.
Yeah, so all 5 of us were back together again. So,
Okay.
I didn't really know what that meant. You know what I mean? I had no meaning to it. With that, they pick me up and they lead me outside, and they try and put me in the back of like an old military truck. So it's got like the lip, but the flatbed is here. So you kind of have to go over the lip to land on the flatbed. But obviously I'm blindfolded, so I can't see, can I? So they kind of shove me over, and I've got my hands all bound, and I land sideways and I break my rib, right? And my rib cracks and it smashes and all the rest of it. I have to tell you a story about that. Roll back to Iraq 6 months earlier. I'm being a bit of a dickhead. I'm riding a trail motorcycle through the Amazon rainforest with a friend, and we come across a very deep creek that had a bridge on it. But the bridge was wood, and some of the slats had broken. Have you ever seen it? Do you know Evel Knievel? Are you old enough to remember Evel Knievel?
I'm American. I know who
Cool.
Evel Knievel is.
Cool. Right. So
it's part of like required history for us.
Okay, cool. So there's a chance to sort of reenact that a little bit. So I make a little small ramp and I jump back, right? So this time I'm going to head back. So I put the ramp right up, take a massive run up on the motorcycle, hit the ramp into the air. This is amazing. If I lean forward, I'll get better aerodynamics, right? Wrong. If you lean forward, the bike suddenly does this, crashes into the ground. There's a metal bar on the handlebar, smash my ribs on the handlebar, break my ribs, right? Okay, cool. Back to the truck now. They throw me over and the ribs get broken, obviously, because they're never healed from the incident in Guyana.
Sure.
Right. So when I get released, I'm telling the press about how my ribs broke and all the rest of it. Massive headlines, hostage, tortured, smashed ribs, all that. Not useless dickhead, smashed ribs on a motorcycle accident, weren't healed properly,
Re-injures them when getting into the back of a truck blindfolded.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, there might have been a bit of artistic license on some of those headlines after I got released. Okay. Just saying it. So with that, they moved me. So I land on the flatbed of the truck. They pick me up and they move me to behind the cab. So you got the cab of the truck and you got the flatbed here. So they're putting me here, but there's a false compartment in front of it. So they put me in with my back to the side of the truck and my knees up to my chest. And then they bring in one of the British guys and they put his back on my knees. And then they bring in a third British guy who would be facing the opposite to me. And then they seal up this compartment they seal it up with a wooden sort of sheet, basically, I suppose. And we drive off. And it's really narrow. I mean, my shoulders are in and my head's banging from side to side, all the rest of it. And I can hear the 2 guards, one guard saying to the other one, "Are you here?" Yeah, I'm beginning to learn their names now. So this is not Glass in the Eye guy. This is the medic.
Okay.
There's a medic and there's another guy called Alec. We'll come back to him. And I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Pete. I'm the client." And both of them went, "Yeah, we know." How do you know that? That's bad.
Like deadpan, like, "No, yeah, we got it, dude. Yeah, we know who you are."
So the guy in front of me had his hands handcuffed behind my back. So I lifted up my blindfold just to look around because I've seen Indiana Jones movies, right? So Indiana Jones will be able to get out of this thing in about 30 seconds. And there's just no way out of this. And I can see the sunlight through the cracks in the welds, but there's no way I'm going to get out of this thing. So I lift up the guy's blindfold in front of me. I'm like, "Look around, see what you see." He's like, I don't see anything. I was like, yeah, right, point taken. So I put his blindfold back down. I put mine back down, and I just put my head to one side of the metal, and I just fell asleep because my head was bouncing around. And we stayed in that truck for probably, I don't know, 12 hours. So eventually the truck stops, and it's dark, and we can hear this ticking. I'm like, this is the cooling down of the engine. The guy in front of me, the security guard, who's supposed to be the expert, is saying to me, no, this is a time bomb. It's going to blow up. I'm like, I don't think it is. I think it's just getting cool. That's all. So I lift my blindfold up and I can see the stars. And I lifted up his. I went, hey, look up. You can see the stars. Because it had like a canvas roof on the truck that they'd rolled back. And I was like, what do you make of that? He's like, well, this guy's, in my opinion, is going a bit off the rails at this point. So, whereas I wanted the Jean-Claude Van Damme thing at the start, I now realize that maybe that's not such a good idea because the only person that can do Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff is Jean-Claude Van Damme. And I'm not with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He's not here.
So, yeah. So this guy who's handcuffed behind his back and blindfolded is saying, we could, jump out, overpower the Iraqis that are sleeping in the back, hotwire the truck. And I was like, look, you're handcuffed behind your back. You can't even go for a piss, right?
Yeah.
Let me put your blindfold back.
Yeah.
So,
shit.
Let's
get back to the realm of the possible here.
Yeah. Let's just sweat it out and see what happens, sort of thing. And he was a bit like, I'd sooner die trying and all this sort of stuff. Look, we're not dead until we're dead, and we're not dead now. So let's just sweat it out. So I put his blindfold back down. I put mine down, and we went to sleep. We were woken up with water and things like that. Yeah, the water. So obviously my guards, British guards, are ex-military. And one of them had only recently come out of the military and actually had a military ID with him that had been taken. We'll come back to that. But of course, they gave me a bottle of water, right? I have the survival instincts of a brick. So I drink this liter of water in like 30 seconds. Of course, they then take the empty bottle off me, right? Unbeknown to me, the British guards do the survival thing, which is probably a military trained thing, where you just put it to your lips and wet your lips and leave it at that, right? So they got to keep their water bottle. So we're driving along a bit, and the guy in front of me says, you got any water left? I was like, no, they took it from me. He's like, why did they do that? I was like, well, I drank it. He's like, what did you do that for? I was like, I don't know. I was thirsty.
I was thirsty, man. This isn't my job. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. So he's like, no, you're only supposed to sip it. I was like, says who? Who made up these rules? So, yeah. So, and then we're trundling along and just weirdo conversations were happening at this point. So it turns out the guy in front of me was an ex-parachute regiment guy. And I'm sure you must have the same thing in the American military. So in the UK, we have different groups of parachute regiments. So there's 1 para, 2 para, 3 para. Yeah. You might have come across them in the job. I didn't realize there was quite a bit of friction between them. So I was talking to the guy in front of me who was handcuffed behind his back, Alec, his name is, and he was saying he was in 1 para. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that means nothing to me, really, but that's great to know. If I ever need to jump out of a plane, what do you do?
Well, I'll ask you, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then he says, but I'm not like the other guy, Alan, who's the team leader. I'm like, what do you mean by that? He's like, oh, he's only 2 para. I'm like, what? He's like, oh, yeah, you're better off with me than him. I'm like, why do I care?
I don't know the difference. I don't also see any airplanes right now.
So, yeah. So he trundled on about that a bit. Anyway, we're in this truck for another day sort of thing. Eventually, the truck stops, and we're going over. Do you know what a cattle grid is? I don't know what you call them in America. They're in a road.
Oh, yeah.
You have like metal bars to stop cows and stuff from crossing. Okay. Yep. So we're going over these cattle grids. The British guys are saying there's only one place where they exist in Iraq, and that's down in Basra. We're in Shia country, which again really meant nothing to me.
Sure,
I'm still thinking Al Qaeda and all sorts of stuff like that. Eventually, the truck stops. I'm led out. I'm put into a vehicle, driven around for only 5-10 minutes, taken out into a room. They take the blindfold off, and I'm stood in a room with the other 2 British guards. And they're like saying to me, did I come down with the other two? Are they alive? Yes, they're alive, or the rest of it. So the two guys in front of me now are Alan, who's the team leader, and the other guy, who I later found out his name was Jason. He's the glass in the ass guy, right? Who
With a
I
broken
thought had
shoulder.
I thought he broke
Okay.
his shoulder. Anyway, transpires he's now out of handcuffs. And I'm like, how's your shoulder? He's like, there was nothing wrong with my shoulder. I was like, I thought you broke it. He's like, oh no, I was just playing to make him feel sorry for me, sort of thing.
No kidding.
He's like, I'm fine. So I was like, okay, fair enough. And then he's like, but I'll tell you what I've got is all this glass down my ass. So I was like, oh yeah, that happened when they smashed the window, didn't
That's
it?
true.
Yeah. So that was the way that went. And I said to bearing in mind what all this stuff that's happened, right? So it's 3 days later at this point, right? All this stuff that's gone on. So my first opening stupid comment to this team leader was, were you in 2 para? He's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, the other guy was in this 1 para. He was going on about it. He's like, oh yeah, he's only 1 para. Yeah, he's like, you're better off now with me. Like, I was like, yeah, whatever. So yeah.
We find it like the things we find to talk about in moments like this. You're like,
yeah,
these guys are having a contest between 1 para and 2 para.
It's just mental stuff. So there was some discussion about who we're being held with, and they're like, I said the other guys think we were in Basra, and he's like, yeah, we think we're in Basra, and this is Shia area. And I was a bit like, well, what does that mean? What does that mean if they are Shia? And they're like, well, I don't really know. Shia militia controlled and all this sort of stuff. It was like, okay. And with that, during the day, this Iraqi came to see us a couple of times, and he's like, we're Shia, we're not Al Qaeda, we're not going to kill you yet, sort of thing. It was a bit like,
okay. So now you guys, I mean, basically 36 hours right now from the moment of of abduction. You guys think that you're in Basra, and then this guy comes in. Does he speak English to you? Is it like good English? Like, how are they treating you at this point?
So as one of the British guards said to me, they're treating me treating us better than they thought they would. Okay. So they're giving us food, like cooked chicken, like so much food. We're having to hide it around the room. There's like sofas and cushions in the room. And we're kind of hiding this food because they've given us too much. We just couldn't eat it. I mean, I hate to say it, the food was quite nice, but having a 4-course meal wasn't really top of my list of priorities.
Yeah,
at this
maybe
point.
not being handcuffed or blindfolded or abducted for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. So, and so they spoke sort of English, and I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't know whether I felt better that they weren't Al Qaeda or not. I didn't really know what it meant. I just didn't know what it meant.
Were they like mean? Were they cruel? Were they indifferent? Were they kind?
They were kind. They were nice. They let us have a shower. They wouldn't let us walk outside of the room unaccompanied, but they let us go to the toilet, let us have a shower, that sort of thing. They gave us clothes.
Wow.
And they gave us food, and it was okay. It wasn't the Hilton Hotel, but it was all right. The big problem they had was all my guards were from Scotland and Wales. So the United Kingdom's made of England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, right? So I'm from the England bit, and I have a fairly, believe it or not, probably not to your listeners of being American, but I have a fairly neutral accent for the country. Okay, Scottish accent is very strong. The Welsh accent can be quite strong. So the problem was they were from Wales and Scotland, and of course the Iraqis couldn't understand the accent, and you've just hit the nail on the head of what happened to me. So I had to translate. So we all got blindfolded. So I've been being held now 5 days, something like that. We all get blindfolded. Someone comes in, an Iraqi comes in that speaks fluent English. And it was a real like Laurel and Hardy comedy sketch. So they wanted to know all about the guards to start with. And so he asked me, what's his name? He'd say, what's his name? I'd be like, Alan, they want to know your name. He's like, my name's Alan. I'm like, he said his name's Alan, just like that sort of thing. So my understanding of these guards is they're all super highly trained ex-military people, right? That's what I've been told. Okay. So they asked him, what does he do? So I'm like, what do you do? He says, I'm your security. He said he's my security. So he's like, what did he do before that? So I'm expecting him to say Special Forces, SAS, whatever, right? CIA, I don't know, whatever he was doing.
Sure.
He's like, what do you do before this? He's like, I worked in a nightclub. And I was like, you what? So cover story, instant blown. And I remember I turned to the Iraqi and I said, he says he works in a nightclub. Like, do you know, I don't know what the term is in America, but we call them bouncers. They're the nightclub security at the entrance. Check ID. Okay. The in England, we call them bouncers. So that's what he said he did. Oh, okay, cool. It's nice to know we've still got the same language somewhere there.
Yeah, exactly. At least us in the in the English. I don't know about the Scots and the Welsh.
Yeah,
I don't know
sure. Yeah, sure. They may call it something completely different. Yeah. So with that, he then went on to the other guard who I can't remember what he said he did before. I think he was the what did he say he did? He said it was a truck driver or something like. I know. Again, I was like, you did what?
If I'm able to provide, maybe a little bit of defense, is in those situations we are trying to downplay skill sets, kind of like your, who was it, Alan, I think, or whoever it was that was, faking the broken shoulder. We try to make it, seem that we're not as trained as we are to try to like let down their guard, because I think that if you were like, I was former special operations or whatever, then they're like, yeah, that's kill him or whatever, to give the benefit of the doubt here. Again, I wasn't in the situation. So some of the things that we try to do is try to downplay who, our specialties.
Yeah, it's a good plan. And what I know from doing hostage survival training again with companies now is if you're going to have cover stories, make sure everyone's aware of them, right? Including your client. Okay. So,
exactly. So you're not doing a Laurel and Hardy thing.
Yeah. So with that, they took me out the room, put me in a car, drove me about 5 minutes away, took me into another room, took the blindfold off, and there's the other two guys. But they're being held in much harsher conditions. They're chained. They've got a chain from their wrist, padlocked, going down to one leg, wrapped around, padlocked, and then the other end of the chain wrapped around and padlocked on the other chain. They're sat facing the wall, blindfolded, handcuffed. So I was a bit like, hello, kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm the guy that came down with you. I'm the client guy. And they went, oh, yeah, we know. Again.
No, we know again. Again, we know.
Yeah. But one of the guys was sat right in the corner. He'd been pushed into a corner between the refrigerator and the wall, was facing the opposite way with his back to us. And I thought, that was a bit weird. So then they blindfold me and they take all three of us into the room next door and the questions start again. And so they say, yeah, I've got the rigmarole. I've got the gig now. You know what I mean? I know what I'm doing. Don't act surprised with whatever they say. They're going to tell me they wash cars or something.
Yeah.
So they asked me about the first guy first. He's the medic. And that was easy. What did you do before? He was a medic before. He worked in a hospital. Okay, sounds plausible. Great. Everyone's happy. Next guy. This is the guy they're treating much more harsh. What does he do? He's my security guard. What did he do before? I was like, what did you do before? He said, I was a bouncer in a nightclub. Same story. I said, he was a bouncer in a nightclub. And this guy went, no, he's not. I said, well, that's what he's just told me. Pull my blindfold off, pull out this card. It's a British Army military ID card, valid. And they're like, we think we've got 4 soldiers and an officer. And I went, no, I'm not an officer. That's nothing to do with me. And they're like, well, we're gonna check that. And then they pull out this book with photographs of military tattoos, like hundreds of the things, like 4 on a page. And they're comparing the military tattoos on this guy's arm. 1 para, 2 para, remember all this business? And they're looking at it. Fortunately, unbeknown to me, these military guys, when they have these military tattoos, they tweak them to like their personal friends and groups and stuff. So there wasn't an exact match, but there was a couple that were pretty damn close. And with that, they put the blindfold back on and they left. And I turned to this guy, Alec. I said to him, they've got a military ID of yours. He said, yeah, I've only just come out of the army. I was like, why you kept the military ID? He said, because he got me through checkpoints faster. I said, I think we've got a problem. and we just left it at that. Really, we was tucked back in the other room. I then got put in with these other two, so I was sat facing the wall. The chain went on. I was handcuffed, just like the other two, blindfolded for most of the day, and we had to sleep like that. We was allowed to go to the toilet twice a day, and they would give us food. About 3-4 days later, they come back, pull me into this room. They're like, "We thought we'd got 4 soldiers and an officer." I said, "No, look, I'm not an officer. These are not military. They're private security." And he says, "Yeah, we know you're not an officer." And at the first of it, I was like, "Oh, that's great. I'm pleased about that."
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, "Hang on a minute. What non-officership have I displayed here? I could be an officer." Like, so I kind of rolled the dice a little bit with them. They said to me that what they said to me was that they'd been to the Ministry of Interior computer where all foreigners are registered, right? And then I told them I was a programmer in the Ministry of Finance and all this story. And they said they'd put my name in and it had come back. The name Peter Moore was employed as, I forget what they said. Something like an analyst or something like that, like an intelligence analyst or something like that. And I said, no. It's a very common name. That's not me. It's someone else. Now, ironically, I knew there was one other Peter Moore on the base. He was a Canadian guy working in the IT system in the Ministry of Finance, ironically. He helped install it. And we'd sort of passed in the corridor, as he went out, I came in sort of thing. So I assumed there'd at least be a third. And so I managed to sort of confuse them a little bit. And they said, "Well, the only other ones we've got are a finance advisor." And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And I remember now, because although I was the programmer, Bearing Point listed everyone as finance advisors. And I questioned it when I was in DC. I said, "I'm not a finance advisor." And they said, "Don't worry, we do that for the visa. Everyone needs to be a finance advisor for the visa." So then, of course, the next problem rolls in. It's like, if you're a finance advisor, what are you doing with Iraqi money? And I'm like, well, I'm not actually a finance advisor. What I'm actually doing is I'm a programmer. Well, if you can imagine how this went. It's like, well, if he was a programmer, it would have said programmer. We think you're trying to now steal money from the Iraqi government or trace fraud, whatever, just this massive kind of conspiracy story. And then, of course, they introduced the fact that I'd installed sophisticated tracking software in the Ministry of Finance. And I was like, what? And then I thought about it and I was like, no, that was this reporting software that I went around installing. And I was like, so it was all a bit like, oh yeah, no, it wasn't quite like that,
Yeah. And they think it's like this elevated thing. And you're like, dude, no, like I'm telling you, I'm just installing some software so we can just track finances. That's exactly that. I know it sounds like a cover story. It is not a cover story. It is the truth, right?
And then they were like, "Well, where did you get the software from?" And I was like, "Well, we had it in our compound." And they're like, "Was it provided by the CIA?" And I was like, I don't think so. I don't. Was it? You start questioning yourself.
Questioning yourself.
I'm like, did the CIA? Is it so covert that I wouldn't know? Is that?
That's what we were dropping the guy off for earlier, right?
Yeah.
Was there like,
just like, what about, what's going on here, kind of thing. And throughout my whole time, they always kept questioning me, saying I was like this military intelligence officer. To the point, at some point, I really thought about saying, "You know what? You've got me. Really, I am a military intelligence officer." But I was worried about what they'd ask next. The only thing I'd seen is James Bond movies. And, based on the movie experience so far, that wasn't going to get me through this sort of thing. So, So I stood quite strong on it about how, I wasn't a military intelligence officer. To the point that when I got released, they did this release interview. And they said to me, "We still think you're a military intelligence officer." I said, "I'm not a military intelligence officer." And he said to me, "No, you're right. You're a very good military intelligence officer." What the hell? So that was like the first sort of couple of weeks.
So now you're a couple of weeks into this thing. You're still
Yeah.
separated. So you have the two guys that are living in conditions that are not so bad. And then
Yeah.
there were the two guys that were living in conditions that were pretty austere. And now you're kind of bunked up with them, being chained to a wall,
Yeah.
and getting a bathroom break twice a day. So what do you guys, so during the time when you guys are, chained up, what are you guys doing? Are you guys
So
talking? Are you guys?
no. So we're all in this small room. There's 3 Iraqi guards and there's the 3 of us. We're not talking at all. And then there's a house guy that lives downstairs. So we're not allowed to talk or anything like that. However, I did try and build a bit of a rapport with an Iraqi that had got injured. I think he tried to explain. It was shrapnel. It was a IED shrapnel bit that had gone into his leg. And so we started talking about it, and he had some medication that needed injecting. And he clearly, some reason I had the blindfold off. I can't remember why, but clearly he didn't know what he was doing. And I turned to the Iraqi leader of that group and I said, he pointed to my medic guy. I was like, he's medic. He can help. And so he took his blindfold off and I turned to this medic. I said, do not this up.
Yeah,
Right.
dude, this is our golden ticket, man.
Yeah. He's like, we could inject him with air. I was like, forget it. You're going to mend this guy. You're going to put this medication in exactly by the book. Nothing, no heroics, right? And and I sort of said, look, he's good. He's going to be fine, sort of thing. And he sort of looked at him and he helped this Iraqi get back to health, kind of thing. And that's when my scar was getting quite infected. So of course he's a medic. So I was able to say to the Iraqi, look, can he look at my leg? So while he's looking at my leg, we're sort of talking about, what we think and all the rest of it. And again, he was surprised by how well the conditions were. And I said, well, they're not as good as you used to go to Hotel Hilton. They're way better over there. So yeah. So, and
They got
that's
extra
when my
chicken and everything.
yeah. So that's when my scar started turning into the shape of the UK and was able to talk to the Iraqis and say, look, I'm from here and, he's from there and this sort of stuff. So, and then, then they started asking us about our wives. So these 2 guys said they were married. So I said I was married. Now, as it transpires, none of us were married. But anyway, I just didn't want to be first in the head slicing stakes. So, I thought I said I was married. I never thought I'd have to build on this story over 2.5 years, sort of thing. And when
no.
and when I went, and then I get transferred back to the other 2 guys, and then they're asked about their marriage status, and they say they're married. So I've got to run with the married thing. I can't now go, oh, well, actually, when I said I was married, I meant I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm not.
Yeah, you're committed.
Yeah. So, over time, they started asking me questions about my wife. Now, fortunately, none of them spoke fluent English. So I was able to have a bit of thinking time. So when they said to me, what's my wife's name? I was like, my wife's name is, and in my mind, there's all these names bouncing around.
Come on.
So I'm like, I'm thinking of all these, the story I give is, I thought about all my ex-girlfriends. I'm a programmer. That list is very small. So I thought about my friends' ex-girlfriends, right? So, and I thought, well, I can't use someone in England because that's far too traceable. So I'm going to have to use someone from Guyana. And there's all sorts of names, So like there was a friend called Bendita. I thought, no, that's too obscure. It's got to be something sort of more in line with my religion, Christianity sort of name,
Sure.
So I knew someone called Emma. So I went with Emma being her first name. And fortunately, just after I was taken hostage, the Iraqis were watching an American movie with subtitles called Formula 51. And there's a character in it called D'Souza. And I thought, D'Souza, that sounds like an American, doesn't it? Her name's Emma D'Souza, right? So over time, they're asking me all sorts of stuff about Emma. And I almost did the line of, do I say I've got children or not? But I thought that was a lie too far, because they're going to ask what was their first word? What did they do? Where did they go? All this stuff that I just don't know.
So they were like
kids.
deeply inquisitive, right? So like over time, it seems like they were just, I mean, curious to have, Westerners at some level to have a conversation with?
Yeah, I think
Was it
so.
interrogation or was it like conversation?
Initially, you would describe it as interrogation, but it was very, very light interrogation. We're not, again, my image of interrogation is a baseball bat chained to a chair, being beaten and all the rest of it. It was not like that. It was more of a conversation. So I was asking them about their family. So I knew from working in international development in South America, you talk about family first. So I was asking them about their wives, their children, how do they live their life, what's the house like? Where's their garage? How do you get a driving license? Remember, their English is not fluent, so something about a driving license you could speak for that take up 4 or 5 hours of the day. So it was
Ah.
quite good in that respect. But my biggest issue in that first 6 months was I was being split between the two guards all the time. Two sets of guards. I was being moved, so it was hard to have a one-on-one conversation with those guards there. And over time, my British guards were getting more and more stressed by the situation. And it was very clear to me that as a team, they were very strong. But once they were broken up, they became very weak and they were started to cry. They, their wife stories started falling apart. They started using names, one name one week, a different name another. Then they said they didn't have any wives and, their story was slowly falling apart. So I played the consistent line, yes, I'm married, her name's Emma, the last name's D'Souza. And I came up with this whole story of the way we met was that Emma works in so all this story, everything I'm about to tell you now is completely false. Okay. But I convinced myself so much about it. It sounds really plausible.
Let me pause
So
you
what
for
I,
a second. You are
oh,
like a master class for how to get through this, by the way. Like I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated how you came up with this on the fly. And it shows the level of like your intelligence, your intellect, your kind of prowess for understanding. I would say EQ, right? To be able to understand what's happening inside of the situation and kind of mold to it.
yeah. So the story I came up with was that Emma D'Souza, so Guyana, Venezuela, Brazil, Suriname, and French Guiana, which I knew would be countries they didn't really know much about, have an Amazonian agreement because the population's so small. All not true, right? Just none of this is true. So what I said was that Emma D'Souza worked for the Brazilian Ministry of Health, and I worked for the Guyana government in IT. So we would cross over in these government buildings as part of this Amazonian agreement. So I would go in and do the IT. She would, on one floor, would be doing health. On another floor is education. Another floor is finance, etc., etc. Right? And so I would be doing the IT for them, and they would come into Guyana and do the health, etc., etc. So that's how we met. And I said that she was actually part of a malaria program, and her mother and father were from Sao Paulo. And I'd never met them because to actually get from Guyana to Sao Paulo is really hard. In fact, getting from Guyana to anywhere is really hard, but especially Guyana to Sao Paulo.
Iraq's pretty difficult to get to from Guyana, by the
Yeah,
way, right?
don't do Guyana to Iraq. That also doesn't work. Um, so yeah, and with that, we'd met over time, and we got married at Kaieteur Falls, which was a real, these are real places, but I knew they'd have to go away and dig it out. Um, Over time, I'm building up this story, and I'm a little bit concerned as time goes on that someone from the British Embassy, I've got this great image in my mind of like, a real out of place British Embassy diplomat running around the Amazon rainforest looking for Emma D'Souza, right? I just love that idea, a guy in like a full suit, walking around the Amazon rainforest, dodging crocodiles and all the rest of it. It never happened, but just let me run with that thought, right?
Just you had a lot of time on your hands to think about this.
Yeah. So I thought, I'm going to have to come up with a story about where Emma lives and all this sort of stuff. So I said that Emma D'Souza lived on the left bank of the Takatu River in Guyana. Now I know that anyone seeing that would know that Guyana's on the right bank of the Takatu River, not the left. So
you're putting like purposeful breadcrumbs out there that they couldn't that the your hostage takers, right, your captors couldn't refute. But if somebody were to do any actual digging on this, they would know that you are lying about this, and
Yeah,
this story is completely false.
yeah, they'd pick up something. Now, a couple of things happened in this time frame in the first 6 months of me being held hostage. Over time, we got to watch TV. So when I was with the guys in the Hotel Hilton, let's call it, um, we was able to watch TV. We were chained individually, but we could watch TV. Now, as it goes, National Geographic Abu Dhabi just started up, and I couldn't believe it. That one of the first programs on there was about Guyana.
Oh,
I was
crap.
like, no, but it was great because I was like,
Oh,
yes,
really?
that's where I've been. I went there. We worked there. Look, it borders Brazil. That's Venezuela. Yeah, that's where I met Emma. We went to that place, this sort of
So
stuff.
by this incredible stroke of luck, you're able to corroborate your story from National Geographic Abu Dhabi, who's doing a little documentary on Guyana. Holy
Yeah,
crap. I mean, and then
I
the
couldn't
fact that you
believe it.
leverage that.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And it really worked in my favor. So a couple of years down the line, no, not, yeah, probably not a couple of years, a year or so down the line, they come back to me with more information about me. I get blindfolded. It's some senior militia leader comes to see me. He's telling me we've got lots of information. And there's some suggestion he's coming out with. He didn't explicitly state it, but the suggestion is he's got my passport from my room when I got taken hostage. And I was a bit like, because there's all sorts of stamps in there. I'd said I'd never been to America to start with, because I'd said Guyana's in South America. They jumped on the America bit, and I'm like, no, South America. And I very quickly learned
Okay.
the Arabic for South America. It's Latini. So, America got dropped very quickly. It's Latini sort of thing. So I was a little bit concerned they'd got my passport, and the way they were sort of talking implied they'd been in my room. So I rolled the dice on it. I said, well, my wife is from Brazil. I've talked to you about that. And he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, okay. I said, did you look in my passport? He said, yep, we've seen your passport. I said, did you see the stamps in the passport? He's like, yes. I said, okay. I said, so there's no American stamps in there. You will see. He's like, yep, we saw that. You've never been to America. So instantly I'm a bit like, I'm not sure. Okay, maybe I've only been that once, but it's a small stamp. You might have missed it. So I said to him, did you see the Brazilian stamps in there? He said, yes. I said, did you get them translated? And he said to me, no, because no one speaks that language in Iraq. I knew then he had nothing on me. I've never been to Brazil, no Brazilian stamps, nothing in there's Portuguese. Like, yeah. So, yeah.
So I've got to
completely.
pause for a minute. What gave you, so like, this is like spy level stuff, right? Like you are without being like overly inflammatory, right, on this thing, but your ability to create immediate checks and balances, to corroborate stories that aren't true, to provide them and bank them into reality and kind of like leash them or chain them to, potential realities. And then on the fly, be able to leave out teasers or put like almost like a lure into the water for them to bite on. And when they bite on it, you can identify immediately very, very quickly. This is, I mean, a fascinating as you're able to do this. Did you have like a mental transition that you were almost like playing a long game with them, that you're like, I'm here, I'm not getting out of this thing. The goal is survival. Like what flipped, and was there a moment in time that you decided like, hey, I'm going to be here for a while and I need to kind of sit on this and make this thing, as long as possible?
Yeah, so I think the big thing, as I keep saying, that fell in my favor was no one was 100% fluent in English. So I couldn't speak
Mm.
to them like this. And they
Okay.
weren't asking me questions like you are. They were very slow. I was very slow. And if I did something slightly wrong and they came at me very angry, I could sort of say, what did you say? You know what I mean? And they've got to slow down, stop, take a deep, and I'm like, oh, yes, understand, sorry,
No,
my
this meant
mistake. Yeah.
that, right? And then
Yeah.
you could have
Yeah.
an ability to kind of pivot, from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you still separated, in the 2 and 2 or the 3 and 2? And
So
how long until you weren't, or did you stay that way?
right. So good question. So we would those two were split up all the time, and I kept being moved for the first sort of 6 months, something like that. And I'm now with the good guys, the Hotel Hilton, as I call it. And there's a news article on CNN about us. All the time, the British guards have been saying to me, look, don't worry about it. We might be held for a while, but these exchanges happen all the time. The British Army will sort it out. And I was just a bit like, I think if he was in the military, they might. We are not no longer military, sort of thing. And all the time, every time the window rattled or whatever, I was like, oh, is that special forces rescuing us or whatever? There was this sort of stuff. There's all sorts of weird things go through your mind. You think they've got helicopters flying over, drones flying over, penetrating whatever LiDAR stuff. So, sometimes if a helicopter went over, I'd be waving in the room just in case they were using some James Bondy sonar thing that can penetrate the walls or whatever. Never happened, right? So we're at a point in December. So we've been held since the 29th of May to sort of early December at this point, 2007. And I'm with the guys that are being held well. So Alan, the team leader, and Glassing the Jason, also called Jason, who's everyone's all recovered at this point. We're out of handcuffs, all the rest of it. And the Iraqis let us watch TV. It's a CNN news article about us. Been missing, just nearly 6 months. And they put on a load of pictures of foreign hostages that have been taken in Iraq. And actually, there weren't that many. It was about 12, which actually over the time frame, I thought was quite a low number. And then it grayed out all the ones that had been killed. And it left 2. And I remember turning to the British guys and saying, this does not look good.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So with that, we kind of went away and they were like, no, really, they want an exchange. These are Shia. They will do the exchange. And I was like, yeah, how long is it going to take and what condition are we going to be in when we get out here? With that within that week, I got moved further north towards Baghdad, and I never saw the British guys again. And I was held with who was I held with? There was a couple of Americans. I was held with a couple of Americans. A guy called Michael Chand, but they were held in a different room, and an Iraqi American, Sergeant El Tai. And I felt a bit. I only learned these names after I got released, I should say. So I felt a bit sorry for Sergeant El Tai. His story was that he was an Iraqi that sort of went to America under the Saddam regime and then went back as a translator with the American army, and he kind of got captured by the Shia. But they kept telling me he was a Saudi spy, but I later found out he was an Iraqi-American translator. And then this other guy, Michael Chand, he was I think he was an ex-Marine, became a private security guard, hit an IED, and then saw the Iraqi police come in and sort of got out of the vehicle and said, hey, our Iraqi police, help us out. Of course, it was the militia. And they also got killed. Yeah.
So at this point, you have been moved, north. You have left your 4 private security contractors. How far along into your total journey was this? And can you roughly estimate?
So this is now December 2007.
So, okay. So random question. Are you able to keep track of the date and the times? How does that kind of work?
So every day I woke up from breakfast, I added a day onto the date. And because I didn't really get to see TV or anything like that until obviously I saw the December CNN news article and I was bang on the date with that. So that was fine. And I didn't see TV again until about March or April of 2008. And I was one day out at that point. And I know where I lost it. There was event called the Charge of the Knights down in Basra, where I was being held on my own at this point. And what had happened was the British military had moved out of Basra, and these Shia militias had come in and taken it over, and the Americans had decided to come back and take it back. And I woke up, and there was jets, there was missiles. Remember I said about the bullet? The guy told me, if you hear the bang of the bullet, you're safe. When I woke up, there were whizzes past the glass window where I was being held. I was chained to this grill in a wall right next to the window. All I could hear was like, zzz, zzz, zzz. Like, yeah. So they moved me out immediately that day. to, I'm not really too sure where, but it was somewhere further north. I think it was between Baghdad and Basra. I think it was a place called Hilla,
Hmm.
I think it's pronounced. But I
Hmm.
don't 100% know for sure. During the time between December and sort of June of 2008, I was constantly being moved between Baghdad and Basra and in that region. And they kept referring to themselves as factions. The North faction operated out of Baghdad and the South faction operated out of Basra. So I knew generally where I was based on the faction term they were using.
So I guess we as soldiers, right, operate with rules of engagement. When we're kind of going on about our business overseas. I think captivity might have its own rules of engagement. What patterns, did you learn about your captors and specific behaviors? How did you learn these kind of like, what tactics gave you space, rather than, or things that kind of like angered them?
Yeah, so they sort of fell into three ranks. So the ranks they used in terms of the militia ranks were the same ranks that were assigned to them as police officers. So there were officers who were actually okay. You could have some sort of conversation with them, ask them about life. They were sort of interested in people. I guess they were better educated. Maybe some of them were ex-military. Some of them had been trained by the British Army and the American military. Um, and they were okay. They were easy to work with, and I had good conversations with them. And then there was like the middle tier, and they referred to themselves as corporals and sergeants. And they just did the job. They would come in, let you go to the toilet. They would give you food. Sometimes if I wanted water or something, I could ask them for water. They'd get me water. And then there was this bottom tier that I later learned the FBI referred to them as the pipe swingers. Um, and they were just horrible. They would treat me how they perceived the Americans were treating Iraqis in prison. So, they'd kick you to wake you up or they'd punch you in the face or something like that. But you just got used to it. It was really weird. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to the system at first, but you sort of, it was just a routine. You wake up, get a punch in the face, go for a pee, have some breakfast, give you a bit of a kick, watch TV, that kind of thing. So, and those lower ranks, I didn't really integrate with very well at all. They were difficult. Whatever you did was always the wrong thing. They'd tell you to stand up when they open the door. So when they open the door, you stand up. They then tell you off for standing up. Et cetera, et cetera.
Did you have to like mentally go through like when something happened, when you would when this lower tier would come in and they would kind of punch you awake, would it be like, okay, well, that's how today's going to go? I know that I need to kind of like mentally check out, and this is, or were you like always on? Like, I mean, did you fear for your life every single day? Like today's the day?
Yeah, I mean, every day I live, I, I, I just thought I was going to die every day, right? So I always thought if that was the day of release, every day I lived was just one step closer to the day of release. But after the first few months, you realize that gap isn't getting any shorter, so everything's just moving along one day. Um, and ultimately, I just thought I'm going to die. And I'd spoke to the senior militia people about this. They'd come and see me once every few months to see how things were going. They'd blindfold me. I never saw them, but we would have some interesting conversations. They were as conversational English, almost fluent. And I said to them, I said, look, I don't mind you holding me, but I want to be held like how your Iraqis are being held by the Americans. They're not being chained up. They are allowed to walk around. They are getting good food. They're getting good water. And ultimately, I don't want to be kept like this for years and then you kill me. If you're going to kill me now. Don't hold me for years and then kill me. And it kind of worked, I think, because they took me out the chains and I wasn't allowed to walk around. I wasn't handcuffed at night anymore when I slept. So things did improve over that. And the only condition was they said to me, look, if you try and escape, we will kill you. By this time, a year, 2 years down the line, I was in I'm not an escape artist anyway, but
And where are you
by
going to
that
go?
time, yeah,
Yeah.
and my muscles had weakened. There's no way I could have ran away. My safest place, I realized my safest place was right there, you know.
Wow.
And again, I learned that from working internationally. The way you survive in Guyana is you get to know the people around you. So even if you know the person next door is a thief, that's fine. I know that. So if something goes missing, I know that that's where I go to get it
It's
back.
kind of like the devil, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I knew, in terms of, provided I didn't do anything wrong, the chances of, as time went on, I realized that the chances of them killing me was slim, but there was also a link. As time went on, I realized that I was linked to their militia leader. So if their biggest fear was the militia leader was going to be handed over to the Iraqi government for execution. So if that militia leader died, so did I. 2 years down the line, I'm sat watching BBC World Service with BBC Arabic with my Iraqi captors, and our pictures come on the news, and there's a picture of a couple of Iraqis, and I didn't know who they were. About 2-3 days later, the Iraqi guy on the photo came to see me, and he'd been released in exchange for two of our British guards. Unfortunately, they had been killed, and so he was released in exchange for the bodies of the guards. And he apologized for that because he said that they shouldn't have died. That wasn't part of their plan. And he explained that his name was this guy, Laith El-Kasali. He's part of this militia group called a Sibel Haq, or the League of Righteous, as it's translated to. He said to me that everyone was dead. I asked about the Americans that I was held with. He said, they're all dead. Everyone is dead. And I sort of questioned it a little bit. I said, how did that happen? And he said two of them had tried to escape. Another two were in a house that they thought was being raided, and they got it wrong and they got killed. And I sort of probed just a little bit more. I was like, but how did that happen? But then in the back of my mind, I was like, let's not push this, because, their status can't be changed. If they're dead, they're dead. It can't go back to being alive. However, I'm still alive and I can be made dead. So don't push my luck too much. But this number two commander, Laith El-Kasali, actually, I got on with him reasonably okay, relatively to the situation.
Why do you think that is? I mean, was it the intellect? Was it the, obviously a language kind of, piece there, but did he see you as an equal?
I don't think he saw me as an equal, but what I felt was that he'd been held by the Americans for 2 years as well, right? So I think we had a few common stories. So, because they kept asking, the Iraqis kept asking me about how was the food that I was, while in my time I was being held. So the first thing I asked him was how was his food with American captivity? It seemed to be the in question to ask. So we sort of talked about what the differences were. And I said, were you chained up? And, why am I chained all day then? If you weren't, why aren't you keeping me in similar conditions? And he agreed. He said, but if I try and escape, they would kill me. He said, if I tried to escape or if a rescue attempt is made, I would be killed. And he said, the only way I was going to get out was in exchange for his brother, a guy called Qais El-Kasali. If you Google him, he's quite a big guy. He got into Iraqi politics and all that. He ended up joining the Iraqi government, but I don't think he's in it anymore. So I was skeptical because this was a big militia leader and I didn't think I'd be exchanged for him. So what I said was to him, I said, well, because his concern was his brother Qais was going to be handed over to the Iraqi government and be executed. And I said, look, Qais, you need to keep me in good condition because I can put myself in a position where you have to kill me. And if I die, so does your brother. We are linked. And with that, he got up and walked out. So it was a big gamble, but I'd been held over 2 years at that point. I was a bit like, I'm just going to roll the dice. I don't care, sort of thing.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I'm looking at his, I'm looking at, his arrest, right? So he was arrested by the SAS in March 2007, raided in a house in Basra.
Yeah. So I was abducted as a result of that to force an exchange. It was abducted they captured him with a Hezbollah operative as well, a guy called Dak Duck, D-A-Q-D-U-Q. Yeah, okay. And I think he was like a Hezbollah trainer for that militia.
So it seems like, as you kind of press through this thing that you almost, were you fearful of death? Did you get to a point where you weren't?
Um, I think fearful isn't the right word, but I think I accepted that more that the odds were that I was going to die. I didn't I didn't really think they were going to execute me unless either I tried to escape or a rescue attempt was going to be made. Right? If those two things happened, they said they would kill me, and I think if those two things had happened, I was going to die. I knew I wasn't going to try and escape. I was in no fit state. I could barely walk
Sure.
across the room, let alone run out of a building and stuff. Um, all my plans of escape had long gone. I was just, they'd gone out the window.
Sure.
So I thought maybe we might get rescued and that might invoke something. And I'll tell you about that in a sec. The third thing that I thought would happen, I was just going to get ill and die. I'd already had dysentery, and they'd got doctors in, and I thought maybe I might have a heart attack, through lack of movement and something like that. Rescue attempt. Let's just talk briefly about that. So these militias, as I said, are Iraqi police. They're really embedded in the system. So what would happen is that if the Iraqi army was in the area, and they knew days in advance if the Iraqi army was coming in the area,
Wow.
what they would do is they would lead me into the bathroom in most cases, in most of these places. And if you push the sink, there was like a hidden room behind it. So the walls are quite thick with a big gap in the middle. And if you push the sink, the door would open. And what they would do is they sat me in there facing the wall, handcuffed me behind my back. An Iraqi would get in the room behind me with a gun behind me to my head. And they would close the door and then lock it, bolt it on the inside. So obviously, if the Iraqi army came in, unless they knew I was directly in that secret room and was able to, I don't know, blow the door off or something without them killing me first, you would never get to me. You
Wow.
wouldn't know. So
And so they just had you completely wrapped up. Like there was just no way that you would be like American or British intelligence just wouldn't be able to and it seems like they kind of knew our systems well enough to be able to try to hide you as best as possible. So
yeah, I was going to say they apparently when I got released, they found they did raid some rooms, some houses. Apparently, when I was a hostage, but they found letters. It was from the British Guards, and one of the letters said, "If you find this letter," it was to his daughter. It said, "If you find this letter, I'm probably dead." So, yeah,
gosh, I'm
that
so
was
sorry to hear that. I'm so sorry to
yeah,
hear that. It's heartbreaking, right? Especially when you develop a relationship with these guys. And
sure.
then
And I
I,
think,
I s-
I think the way I saw it, the way I reconcile it now is we all entered the game on the same playing field and we all played the game by our own rules. And some of us did better than others. And that's just the way I saw it. We played this game. We knew the risks. It was a gamble and we all tried to play it our own way. And,
yeah.
it's just that my way worked is all I can say about it.
Right. I mean, it's the incredible strength that you showed kind of through this. I think what strikes me is we're crossing through a lot of time here, and when you do find out about all of the Americans are dead, all of the British, security contractors that you're with are dead, and you're it. You're like the one that you know about, and you're it, and everyone else has gone at this point. Did you I don't know how you could even feel I don't know how you could feel more isolated than you already were, but talk me through that mental challenge. That like, did you have conversations with yourself? Did you just go numb, right? What was that like?
I, I sort of took a bit of an abstract view of it. I was like, if you was a betting person, if you were putting money on who would survive this, would you bet on the programmer? And the answer is no, you wouldn't do that. And suddenly the odds really fell out of my favor. I was like, if none of these military trained people can survive this, I'm not going to be able to survive this. Um, so I really kind of reconciled that I wasn't going to survive at some point. And it got to a point it was just over the 2-year mark when I'd met this number 2 commander. I'd been told everyone was dead, all the rest of it. And up to that point, I'd been chained by both feet to a grill. And I complained. I said, look, America didn't do this to you. Why are you doing it to me? All this sort of stuff. And they took the chain off and they put the chain on a shelf in a cupboard next to me. And I didn't really know how I was going to die. But this execution malarkey didn't sound like a bundle of laughs. So at about the 6.5 month mark, I was with the British team leader and an Iraqi police sergeant came in from the Ministry of Transport, who actually we got on fairly well with. And he took me off the chain and handcuffed me behind my back and blindfolded me. Now, they did that when we was doing a move. But normally we did the moves at night, and this was in the day. It was a bit weird. And he took me outside, and he pushed me to the floor down onto my knees. And I felt like a metal thing hit the side of my head. And then there was a click. And then there was a bang. And I just sat there, hands behind my back, and I'm like, I'm dead. They've just killed me. And I was like, well, actually, that doesn't feel too bad. And then I could hear people laughing, and the blindfold is just like a piece of cloth, so it's not like a NATO blindfold, it's just a rag, and you could see daylight down in the bottom. And when the trigger went bang, everything went greyed out, so all the sunlight went, and then ever so slowly, the sunlight sort of started to come back, and I was like, I mean, is this heaven? I've made it to heaven, and then no, I'm still handcuffed. I'm blindfolded. I didn't quite know how I felt about it. I'm like, and then with that, they sort of picked me up and led me back in. And Alan said to me, "What happened?" I was like, "I don't know. I think they just shot me in the head." I was like, "What happened?" And I was really annoyed about it because I always said if I was going to be executed, I was going to be really strong. There's this phrase, the British stiff upper lip.
Stiff upper lip.
It's like, right, okay, yeah, okay, you got it. So I always, if it was going to execute me, I was going to show no fear. I was going to be really strong with it. They put the gun to my head, and there was a click, and I just started trembling and started sweating. I'd never felt a fear like it. It was just unbelievable. I can't describe it. It was phenomenal fear. And I vowed I never would do that again. So sort of roll forward to this time now, 2 years down the line, 2 and a bit years down the line, they've taken the chain off. I'm running through the options of how I can die. Execution, I don't want that. I don't want that happening. That wasn't great. I didn't really want to die through illness. That sounded like a long, slow kind of process. So I thought the reality is it's better if I can kill myself in my own way and my own choosing. So how am I going to do that? How can I kill myself in this room with very limited resources? So in this room that I was in, there was a big hook in the ceiling, and it held like a chandelier, and they'd moved that chandelier out, and the Iraqis would come in with a bar and do chin-ups on this hook. So I knew it was very strong. So they took the chain off me and put it on the shelf. So I thought it'd be really fitting to hang myself with the chain on the hook, right? And I thought about it. I thought about it a lot, because conditions weren't that bad at this point. I had an ensuite toilet. I was now at the chain. I could walk around a bit, had a TV, that sort of thing. So I was a bit like, what? Really, really truthfully, let's think about this. Why do I want to do this? And, I want to say I thought through my life. I thought through my parents, family, whatever, Emma D'Souza back in Guyana, all that stuff. Right? No, none of that. The only reason I wanted to hang myself was I knew the Iraqis would get in big trouble for letting that happen. And all I wanted to do was see the reaction of their faces when they walked in and see me hanging there. So having planned this, I'm now really annoyed with myself because logic says if I'm dead, I'm not going to be able to see that. So I've got to, again, I'm back to this point of shut up, suck it up, change your mindset. And
Stiff upper
from
lip.
from this point on, I am going to survive this no matter what, or do it, make your decision. And at
Wow.
that point, that was the point when I said to myself, that's it. I'm going to survive this. I'm going to make this out. I don't care how many years it takes. I'm going to be a burden to this militia, and they're not going to kill me unless they choose to. I am going to survive it. And at that point, that's when I started changing things. So when the militia said to me things like, can you stand up? I'm like, you want me to stand up? Okay, I'm standing up now. And I really emphasized it so that if they wanted to kill me, it was through their choosing and not through my wrongdoing. And then I started costing them more money. So every couple of weeks, if I had some toothpaste left, I would squeeze the toothpaste down the toilet deliberately so they had to buy me more toothpaste. I made them replace the pillows every couple of months. I started costing them money. I want more T-shirts. Get rid of this T-shirt. I've had it for 2 months. I want new ones. My thinking was that somewhere in the system, I'm causing unnecessary spending. Someone's going to pick it up. But
There's that finance line coming again.
yeah. But, unbeknownst to me, this militia was getting millions from Iran, and like my tube of toothpaste wouldn't even show. But hey ho, that was the game plan. So,
well, I love it. Make as much noise as you can within a circle of control or a sphere of control, right? Is to be able to say, I can't control much in this grand scheme of things, but I can control this, and I'm going to continue to dominate that. The mental resilience that you had to be able to come up with and find on the spot. And I think what's really fascinating is, to me, create. Like, this wasn't something that you were prepared for. This was so far. You were in Iraq for 6 weeks before you became, captured, right? And so you had to create this persona. And really, I think that as much as Americans and Brits give each other, crap left and right, I think that stiff upper lip, man, that matters a lot. Kudos to you. So now take me through. So eventually what happens is you do get released through a prisoner exchange.
So my belief was the longer I kept myself alive, the more inconvenience to the British government I was. There was, I got the impression that I didn't think they wanted us to die. And I've since spoke to government officials, and they all say, we did all we could to get us released. And I always pull them up on that. You didn't do all that you could. You did all that you could within the boundaries of government legislation to try and get us released. And that's very different from doing all that you can, right? So I do pull them up on that a little bit. But having said that, I chose to go there. The reality is they could have done nothing, but they chose to do something, which I guess is better than nothing. But really, the dynamics of Iraq were changing. I could see it on the news. So I could see that America was withdrawing, British forces were withdrawing, the handover was happening. I could see all that going on the news. So it was obvious to me by this sort of November 2009, December 2009, that at some point I would be released. And I remember seeing on the news, the British were looking at withdrawing by something like, I don't know, I forget, maybe June 2010 or something like that. So in my mind, I was sort of holding out for that kind of thing.
Did that make you feel like you had an expiration date?
I just felt not an expiration date on myself, but I just felt like the reason to hold me was disappearing, and the reason to hold Case El Kasali was disappearing. It was obvious to me, from my perspective of what I was seeing, that ultimately we were all going to get released. There was no point killing anyone in this business, in this show at this point. And I met Laith El Kasali again, I think in about November of 2009. And I said to him, look, I can see this on the TV. The America's going, Britain's going, the Iraqi government's taking over. Your brother is going to be released at some point, and you will release me at some point. Our value has gone. What you're doing now has expired. The value was 2 years ago. The value now is, the dynamics have changed.
Yeah, you played your hand, right? And it's becoming less valuable as the cards continue to fall. How do you keep your value up as a card, though? When they're like, okay, fine. I mean, just go shoot the guy out back and move on with our lives. Is it still always tied to this, excuse me, because
case El Kasali. Yeah. So I made it clear that obviously my release is now linked to his release. And I did say to him, you made that dynamic, not me. You could release me and he will be released separately, but you've made it that we're linked. So neither of us are going to be released until the other one gets released. And you can see his brain like, oh yeah, what do we do now, sort of thing. It's like, oh yeah, how do we work that out, kind of thing, So we get to December the 29th, 2009, and no, actually, that's not true. That's the day of release. So roll back a few days before that. So we're in the last week of December, something like that, 2009. And I'm watching like local Baghdad news with the Iraqis. But you got to understand, by this time, I'm with these Iraqis. Life's as good as it's going to be. I wake up in the morning. One escorts me to the toilet. We talk about the weather. Where's my breakfast? Where's my cup of tea? What's going on? You're late. We've got a good routine going at this point. There's even to the point I've got an Iraqi that's been hit in the back by an IED shrapnel, and I'm really concerned about the guy. I make out it's because I think he's my best mate. The reality is I don't want him dying on my shift. You know what I mean? If you're gonna die, go and do it somewhere else, not with me around. And he actually told me an interesting story. A story that he told me. So we started playing some games what do you call it? We call it drafts.
Oh, checkers or backgammon?
Checkers. Not backgammon. Checkers.
On chessboard, so chess or checkers.
Okay. So they play a similar game like that, and I started actually getting quite good at it. He was getting quite annoyed because I kept winning. So I kept deliberately losing to make him feel better.
Again, not fair, because you were a data scientist, right, and a programmer.
Yeah.
Got to stack the deck.
Yeah. So that was good. So anyway, I got talking to, and this guy. Oh yeah, this guy is the same guy that had the machine gun slung over his arm that pointed his groin that took me hostage in the first place.
This is the very first guy? Oh my God.
Yeah. So I met him in my last 6 months. He was working in Baghdad. So I actually, as best as I could, got on with him okay. He didn't really speak very good English, but, we had a bit of a giggle here and there. But he described to me one day, he said he was down in the south of Iraq somewhere. And because he showed me his pistol. That's what he showed me. So again, I'm an IT guy, but I've been held for a couple of years now, so I'm a bit more firearm aware. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He showed me the pistol, and they were all using Glocks. And at this point, I was like, "That's not a Glock. What's that?" And he said to me, "Oh, it's a Ruger." So I said to him, "How did you get that?" Thinking he'd, I don't know, robbed a shop or something. Anyway, he said to me, he was down in the south, and he said they were putting in an IED, and a military convoy hit it. An American military convoy hit it, and it flipped the vehicle over. And he said that he went over to this American that was really badly injured, so he pulled his pistol out and shot him. I was a bit like, oh shit, yeah. So that's how he got it.
So I'm looking at the Rugers themselves. This wasn't general purpose military that carried these things. Interesting.
Right.
Yeah, it's right. So where he got it, again, there's that's why it was a little unfamiliar to me. They do exist. They are a pistol, they are a firearm, but this is not something that general purpose guys carry too often. So take me through as you're getting ready to figure this process out, and what's kind of unfolding.
Yeah. So about the last week of December. So I'm sort of watching Baghdad news with the Iraqis at this point. We're all in the same room, and it's all in Arabic. I'm not really sure what's going on, but on the news is like a CCTV image of a vehicle pulling up and someone getting out. And the Iraqis have got quite excited about it. And they said to me, "That's Blackwater." And I said, no. That's not Blackwater. That's diplomatic. And there was a bit of discussion about that, and then nothing, right? So a couple of days later, December the 29th, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It's still dark. And this Iraqi comes in, gives him a bit of a kick to wake me up. And he's like, get up. I'm like, why? He's like,
yeah. Dude, the stones that you have, my God, the stones that you have.
Yeah. So he's like, you need to go. I'm like, go where? He's like, you go. I'm just like, no. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. You go. And I just
Piss off.
I just turned over and went back to sleep. So anyway, they're bringing this other Iraqi guy who I've known for about a year, and he speaks really good English. I'd been teaching him some English using Shakespeare books. And
How British of you. How very British of you.
I know. And he comes in and says, look, you've got to get up. And he says, look, you're being released. So I'm like, why? Why am I being released? I was like this stroppy teenager sort of thing. You know? He's like, look, our leader's been handed over. You have to go to the British embassy. And it's like, look, we've got you new clothes. And I'm just like, well, yeah, whatever. You know, you've got to remember, every couple of months they've been telling me I'm going to be released. So I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I thought maybe this militia had a fight with Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda had captured some of their militia and they were going to do an exchange with me. That's what I thought really was going on.
So you go from out of the frying pan into the fire kind of thing.
Yeah, but this would fall in my favor because I knew Al-Qaeda would accept a ransom payment and I had kidnap and ransom insurance. It was part of my job. But unbeknown to me, my company had gone bankrupt, but I didn't know that, right? So I go and have a shower and I put these new clothes on and they make me do this release interview. Again, I've done this release interview a ton of times.
Okay, so you're not thinking anything is new. You're like, same story, different day. There's no like spidey senses going on. You're not feeling anything. You're just going through the motions.
I'm thinking something is happening, but whatever's happening is I'm not being released. That's out of all the things that could happen, I am not being released. I may be being moved to Iran. I might be being moved to Hezbollah. I might be being moved to Lebanon or Syria or whatever, you know, but I'm not being released, right? Out of all the things that could happen, I'm not being released, even if it's going to Al-Qaeda. So, I do the release interview and then the guy just walks out. This is the guy I've been with a year. You know, he's not very excited that if I'm being released. I would have thought, he can go home now. He's done his job, but there's no excitement from them at all. So I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. So I'm in this room on my own for about an hour after doing this interview. And the guy comes back in, he blindfolds me and leads me out into the back of a vehicle. They drive off a bit, they stop, they take the blindfold off. In front of me is the original guy with the machine gun that, pointed at my groin. And there's a driver. And, we drive off and he's videoing me. He's like turning around in the front seat, videoing me as we drive along. And then we're only driving 10, 15 minutes. I don't know where we are. We're in some sort of town or city. It turns out we're in Baghdad, but I didn't know that. And we get stopped at an Iraqi army checkpoint. And this Iraqi soldier walks up to the window and talks to the driver, talks to the passenger, looks at me, talks to the passenger, looks at the driver, looks at me, talks to the driver, all this kind of. I'm like, this guy's going to ask me something. So the driver gives him his driving license, and the Iraqi soldier walks off. And it's taken quite an uncomfortable amount of time, Traffic stops can be slow, but this is like, taking an awful lot of time. So anyway, after about what seemed like an eternity, probably about 10 minutes, this Iraqi soldier comes back, has a bit of discussion with the driver, gives him his driving license off and waves us off. So I thought, so much for the Iraqi army looking for me kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm the only white guy here, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So with that, we drive on for another few minutes and then we pull into this driveway of a house and I get out the vehicle and I walk through these doors and I'm in this room in a house. It's a fairly long room, but there's nothing in it apart from a load of people, probably about 50 people. Half of them wearing like military gear with scarves around their face, big machine guns, and the other half just wearing normal clothes. Loads of them have got cameras and all the rest of it. At the end of this room is a sofa, and there's a guy in a suit sat on it. And, that's the only oddball thing about his room. And this guy in the suit stands up. He says, are you Peter Moore? I says, yeah. He says, my name's Sami Al-Askari. I'm like, okay. He says,
Me.
I'm with the... Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, who? And he says, I'm with the Iraqi government. I'm here to take you home. My initial thought was, my situation has not improved. I've been held by the Iraqi police for 2.5 years, and now I'm going to be held by the Iraqi government. Fantastic. So he tells me to sit down on the sofa, and he makes some statements to camera, and then I'm asked to make a statement to camera. I have to say what a great time I've had. I'd give you 5 stars on TripAdvisor, recommend it to anyone, all this sort of stuff. And with that, the guy in the suit gets up and walks off. So I still don't believe I'm being released. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm not being released. I don't know who the hell this guy is, right? And he walks out the building. He walks out. So I'm left here on this sofa. And these other Iraqis are like, go, go, go. So I start walking towards the back of this room to get to the door. And I'm stopped by this guy in camo gear, big gun, all the rest of it. And he stops me with his hands, turns me around. He stands on one side of me. Another guy in militia gear stands next to me. And then this third guy is about a couple of meters away from me with militia gear. He's got his hand down his back. And I'm like, this is it. This is the end now. This is where it's going to go in front of all these people, all these cameras. This is it. Had a good run. Just let it happen. He pulls out a camera and takes a photo of all the three of us. I assume it's one for the Facebook page or something.
Oh my God.
And with that, they're just like, go. So I walk outside and I get in the back of this vehicle. This Iraqi government guy sat next to me. 2 guys in the front, machine guns in the front. They've got twirly things in the rear. I can hear them talking Arabic, and we drive off. I can hear this Iraqi MP is on the phone. He's like, yeah, he's with me now. We'll be there in 5 minutes. Boom. And he said that was the British Embassy. I thought, no way. If that was the British Embassy, they'd want to talk to me. And we're driving along in Baghdad traffic, and it's really slow. And there's loads of traffic, and I can see the doors unlocked. I thought, do I do a runner? What do I do? Do I try and escape at this point, or do I trust this guy? And the only reason I didn't try and escape was I didn't want to jump out the vehicle and be shot by the militia that were probably following me. So I thought, sweat it out. Even if it is Al Qaeda, they'll take ransom. It'll be okay. With that, we drive through some blast walls and we pull up in this driveway. I have no idea where we are. I get out and this guy walks up to me. I don't know who he is. He's wearing this bright pink shirt, cream trousers, looks totally out of place. He can only be one thing. He must be a British government official, right? So he walks up to me. He's like, "Are you Peter Moore?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "This is the British Embassy. We're here to take you home." And
oh my God,
I just couldn't believe it. So I always had this thought in my head, when I get released, I'm going to make this great statement. It'll be the name of the book, the movie. I'm going to make millions from it. I'll live off the royalties forever. So all I wanted to be was on my own. I've just been on my own for 2.5 years, and now I want to be on my own again, right? I'm like, my brain's all over the place. So I said, the only place I could think of where I could be on my own was the toilet. And I'm just like, I need a pee. That was my first opening line. I'm like, out of all the things I could have said. So he's like, yeah, the toilet's there. So I go into the bathroom and I put my hands on the wall. And I start banging my head on the wall. And I'm like, stop. You're cracking up. You're going to hurt yourself. Get a grip. And I turned around and I turned on the sink and I splashed my face. And I looked up and there was this bank of mirrors and I was just looking back at myself. And I'm like, you've done it. You've beaten the odds. And I just started crying at that point. I couldn't believe it.
Oh my God. My God, Pete, dude, seriously. I'm speechless, right? And this is my job, right? Is to ask questions right here. The well of emotions. I'm speechless. I really am. I've never been taken through a story like this with so little chance of getting through the odds, and then having this moment and then staring into a mirror and finally saying, it's done.
Yeah.
What did you do next? How long did you stay in the bathroom? Did you talk to yourself in the mirror? What did you do?
Yeah. I sort of put my hands on the sink and looked at myself and I was like, you've you've got to do something. You can't stay here forever.
Yeah, can't stay in here forever.
Yeah, you've got to step outside. So I'm like, okay, deep breath. Let's do this. And I stepped outside, and there was just embassy staff. It was so weird. It was so random. I'm a big guy. I go down the supermarket to buy clothes. I can't find clothes to fit me. I'm in the British Embassy. There's this police officer there from the counter-terrorism unit, and he said, "We've got you some clothes for you," and they fit perfectly. I'm like, "What the hell?" Like, you just happen to have my size clothes in case the odd hostage hops by. Like, what's that
you've
about?
known this the entire time, but you haven't. Right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they were expecting. Well, at first they were expecting another body. So obviously I wasn't. They didn't know what state I was in. The impression they got was I was like some traumatic nervous wreck or something. I'd got past that, but I was like that, in the first 6 months, and now now I'd sorted my shit
stabilized,
out, and I'd got everything going, so it was fine. And it was just so bizarre. And they took samples of my hair, scraped into my nails. They wanted my clothes. I managed to keep my prayer beads. The militia leader, they brought me these really high quality prayer beads, but they bleached them before I left, so they no one can trace them. So I said, look, these have been bleached. These are no use to you. I want to keep. I've still got them. I was like, I'm very proud of the fact. So I felt very proud that I managed to get them from the militia. I'm very proud I kept them from the British government as well.
Wow.
It's like a double win,
So what happens next? I mean, I'm assuming they're going to debrief you at some point and try to gather as much information from you. Or did they go right into like protocol, or did they like, hey, would you like to grab a cup of, well, you guys cup of tea, right? And grab, right, and sit down? Or like, were you like a specimen, or were you like, hey, give this guy some space?
So everyone wanted to talk to me quite quickly. I think initially they had of course it was New Year, wasn't it? So no one was really in to start with. So some poor American guy, I've never met him since. I'd love to meet him now, see what he thought about it. But some American military psychologist obviously drew the short straw. I just imagine it. He's sat in his barracks, whatever, 29th of December, he's a military psychologist. I mean, how hard a job can that be? Phone rings. I'm glad you answered. Come down to the British Embassy. We just had this hostage got released. He's like, what? Yeah. So, he turns up and he starts talking to me, and he's making notes, to be fair, which I did later see when I arrived back in the UK. Right. So it's got at the top of it like name, age, all this sort of stuff. And then it's got observations. Just bear in mind, this is a military psychologist, spent, I don't know, 6 years doing a PhD, whatever, another 5 years in combat, hospital, trauma, whatever. So, I'm expecting some quite comprehensive observations, because I'm curious. It says, shows signs of stress. No shit. You spent that amount of time in university to come to that conclusion,
That's what you gathered out of all of this.
Yeah. I'm like, thanks for your professional assessment, Yeah.
Leave it to the Americans to be brief,
Yeah. I mean, say what's on the tin sort of thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I then, it was really weird. I then got to see things like the BBC Review of the Year. Of course, I can't call anybody initially because the telecoms are down, obviously, power failure and all that kind of thing. So nothing changes, right? Eventually, I do get on the mobile. I think we use a mobile, so I'd managed to speak to my step parents. That's fine. They hadn't heard from me in years, not because I've been a hostage, because I've been stuck in the middle of the Amazon rainforest for whatever 3 years previous. So, my big story to them was going to be that I swam to another country from Guyana to Brazil, but I did it in dry season, so the river was like a little stream. But of course, all this hostage thing had superseded that. So yeah, I did speak to them, and then I spoke to the Foreign Secretary, a guy called David Miliband. What would be your equivalent of that? foreign. Who do you have that represents the US government foreign wise?
Like an ambassador to the country?
Yeah,
or
like no, above that, in charge
or
of ambassadors.
like a State Department. Yeah, like our Secretary of State.
Yeah, Secretary of State. That's it. So I spoke to our foreign secretary, who's like your Secretary of State, and yeah, the line was terrible. It was absolutely atrocious. It was crackly and everything. So all I could say was like, yes, hello, yeah, what, yes, no, yeah. It was a horrible conversation. And then I got to see the BBC News conference. So I'm sat watching BBC News at the time, and they've got wind that another of these hostages from the Ministry of Finance has been released. It's most likely going to be a body and all this sort of stuff. What does that mean for relationships between Iraq and Britain and all that stuff? And I thought, great, give it a positive spin. Why don't you? And then they go straight over to David Miliband, Foreign Secretary. He's making the statement now, live, bang. I'm pleased to announce that Peter Moore's been released. We've had a very moving conversation. Not really, we're very pleased, and our government services are doing all the best we can now, and all that sort of stuff. Goes back to the studio, and they're like, "Oh, we knew it was going to be something positive because." No, you didn't.
You didn't even have. You had clothes that were for me that you thought I was going to be dead minutes ago. Right?
Oh man. So then, and then, like some weirdness happens. So it starts because it's the end of the year. They're doing all like the review of the year. Now, what I learned is the review of the year is pre-recorded because I'm not on it, right? So, but it's so long since I'd seen anything sort of majorly Western. Yeah. So I'm watching this music thing, and it's got Gaga, Radio Gaga by Queen, right?
Yes,
that's what I'm thinking. But it's not. It's a woman,
Lady Gaga.
I'm like, what? yeah, Lady Gaga. I'm like, what the heck?
Who the heck is that?
Yeah. So that was my first sort of thing that I saw that wasn't news after I got
This
released.
is totally a very, and it's fitting that you're British, but very Austin Powers, right? Where like he comes out of this, whatever the cryo thing, and he gets to watch what happened. So you had to you didn't know what was going on in the world for 2.5 years, 2 years and 7 months, right? 960 days, I think it is.
Yeah.
And
2008 was a leap year, of course.
Right. And so now you're getting to go and relive this experience of everything that we had collectively, as a world, had gone through, and you have to relive. What was that like?
Well, it's bizarre because I didn't realize you had an economic crash as well during that time, like a real severe economic crash. So I didn't know that. That didn't affect me any at all.
Yeah. You're like, oh, well, I came out through the recession okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And from an IT perspective, Windows Vista had been released, so that wasn't an issue for me either. So everyone was complaining about it. Wasn't a problem for me. I
love the nerd joke. You're like, I thought we were still using Windows 98.
That's right. Yeah. Probably about 1% of your listeners are going to understand that joke, right?
Don't worry. I'm from Silicon Valley. I understand that reference.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's good. So it was just really weird. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. They wouldn't let me go anywhere. Because I was like, do you still go to the PX or whatever? It's like, yeah, we do. You're not.
Yeah, right. We just got you back. We're not losing you again. Yeah.
Oh, the big news. You remember I talked about this mythical American embassy. The American embassy got built.
Yeah.
And reopened, and it was open, and it was operational. So that was good. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
So okay, so then how do you get out of Iraq? Because that would be my very first question is when can I leave? Right. So let's do this dance. We've done this. Can I go home, please?
Yeah. So I was in the American embassy because obviously it was New Year, right? So they released me at the most inappropriate time. Everyone had gone. Everything had shut down basically. So I was in the American embassy for a couple of days. So the way I got out was the American military flew me from the grounds of the British embassy. And I don't know if I sent you a photo of it. There's a photo of me in the helicopter.
Yeah, I have it. I'll put it up.
Yeah, but there's actually one that's more of the helicopter, and there's a wooden box that they use to allow people to step on the wooden box. I didn't send it to you, but
Okay.
I'll send you the photo. It's funny because I don't know too much about helicopters, right? Military helicopters, but so I stepped on the wooden box and stepped into the helicopter, and the pilot, to be fair, he turned around and shook my hand and said, "I'm whoever." I said, "Yeah, I'm Peter Moore," and he's like, "Yeah, I know." I was going, "Yeah, I guess
Yeah,
you do."
I know.
Yeah. I not thought about that. So yeah, with that, they pick up the wooden box and put it in the helicopter, and they said, "This is the difference between traveling in a military helicopter and one that's been adapted for diplomatic travel. You get the wooden box to step on, so you'd have to step so high." I was like, "Great, okay, cool."
All of the niceties of the American
Yes.
government. There you go. We roll out the red carpet for you.
So yeah, so and I joked with the militia about this on the sort of when we was talking about being released. I said that I was concerned that when I eventually get released and I'm flying out, you're gonna shoot down the plane I'm in, sort of thing. So I never felt I was really being released. So the Americans flew me to Baghdad airport, and I just stepped off the helicopter and walked up the steps of a government jet, which you have got the photo for. And they flew me out of Baghdad to Jordan, and it was only really when I landed in Jordan that's when I thought, yeah, I'm out of it. They're not going to shoot me down from now, so this is it. And with that, I stepped onto a government, I don't know how you describe it, a mobile. It's basically a mobile hospital. It's like a 747 that's a hospital, medical evacuation aircraft. So yeah, and that they flew me back to the UK, and I got off at an airport called Bryce Norton. It's a military airbase, and I was picked up by counter-terrorism police, and I went into something like 20 odd days of debrief with them at that point. And it to be honest, it just felt like I was still a hostage. I'd just been relocated and was just with other new people, So yeah.
Was the food any better? Yeah, you didn't get punched awake in the morning,
Nice. Yeah, I missed that. And of course, I got released in the UK in the coldest winter in 20 years, and it was just tons of snow and everything. So the plan was that I would stay in this government house with my step parents in the evening, and the anti-terrorist police would come and question me during the day. But the snow was so bad that the anti-terrorist police couldn't get from this government house back to their hotel because it was like up a hill. So we all had to stay in this government house, which totally blew their plan apart. But anyway, never mind. So yeah, it worked fine. It worked all right. Did the debrief. And then life for that first year just went weird. I was flown to America. The Americans wanted to debrief me. I went to Guyana, and the American FBI extraterritorial unit came to Guyana to see me. And then, of course, all these things start coming into play at this point. It's like, the reason they want to see me in Guyana is so that I don't get any protection of the American legal system. But then again, maybe they want to see me in Guyana so that they can talk more freely and they're actually nice people. And, all these things come into, all these weird random stuff come to play. So, yeah. And there's all sorts of weird teams. I didn't realize. So I met like military teams that were investigating, disappearing military personnel from 2008 to 2010. And I'm like, you really need a team for that? How many people went missing? That
right,
sort of
right.
stuff, yeah. So, and there's weird conduct. You must know conduct after capture is part of like the SEER training, military training you do, right? Conduct after capture. Okay. So when I got out, I get contacted by military units that do CAC training for survival.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in English, British English, if something is CAC, it's not very good. So if your coffee is CAC, it's bad coffee, right? So they kept going on to me about these CAC courses they do. And I'm like,
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm like, because I thought, with my training background in computing and being a hostage, they wanted me to analyze the course they were doing and make it not CAC, make it good. But I thought, no, this can't be right. You're going on about it too much. You wouldn't say this if it was a bad course all the time. And of course, I learned it meant conduct after capture. So I did all that. And I subsequently developed a virtual reality training program. It's a prototype with the Danish military for conduct after capture. It's
Wow.
not sort of gone very far, but it's not. It went as far as I could really make it go. Being a civilian, no military contacts, that sort of thing. But it's a
Wow.
prototype, and it does work. And I have tested it on military units, and it's okay. But without sort of without someone showing interest in it and putting effort and time in to make it better,
Sure.
it needs work. It's a prototype. It proves the point. But I've demonstrated it at a couple of military shows and things like that. And
So
yeah.
I have a burning question for you. So first of all, this will lead it. So when it was all said and done, and everything was and the dust kind of settled, did you ever watch the movie Long Way Down?
Oh, I did. Yeah. So of course I get released, and all my stuff from my apartment is in the British Embassy, isn't it? In a big box. And I'm like, I've got the DVD, and I got to see
Finally.
it. Yeah. But what was funny was, in the time I was being held, National Geographic Abu Dhabi actually showed it, but in Arabic. So I saw
Really?
it in Arabic, yeah, but I was able to see it in English. And I watched it. And
What was
the
that
thing
like?
was, it was great, but I didn't have a DVD player. So someone from the anti-terrorist police went out and got me one of these portable DVD players with the little lid they
Yeah,
used to
yeah,
have.
yeah,
Got
yeah,
me
yeah,
one to
yeah.
watch it. I was like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, yeah. So yeah, it was brilliant. And then I subsequently watched the other one, The Long Way Round, as well. They did. So yeah, it was good.
And
So I
so
got to see it.
you mentioned on the pre-interview that you got a chance to be able to do something similar in the United States itself. So can you tell me a little bit about that? I mean, I guess
Yeah.
there's an American, I think it's an American saying that says, freedom has a flavor the protected will never know. Um, I think that this means a lot. Something very, very different for you, right? Is now, let's talk about the idea of being on a motorcycle, right? Like a kind of almost what I think is so symbolic is that this is the DVD you got the day that you were captured. You planned on watching that the night that you were captured, and you never got to watch it. And then you kind of are able to do this full circle thing, not only watch the DVD, but then kind of experience that. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So while I was in Guyana, myself and a couple of friends, we agreed to do a motorcycle tour of the USA and North America. But our timings just didn't align very well. And so I sort of, one guy ended up getting another job, so he fell out of it. And then there was a woman that I worked with called Amber. We got on quite close. Maybe we might have had a relationship, maybe not. But I said, "Oh well, I'm going to go to Guyana do this job for 6 months. You finish off in Guyana. We'll meet up in DC. We buy a motorcycle, ride around all the states." Da 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 da. And yeah, we got on very well. We weren't in a relationship, but I guess it would have been nice if it had materialized. So I come out of Iraq. Unfortunately, she's been diagnosed with cancer, and she subsequently
Cool.
dies. Like within a few months, like probably not even 3 months of me being released. So I then I find some of the friends, some of the people in Guyana, the Peace Corps, that were finishing off, that could actually waste 2 years of their life just riding on the back of a motorcycle. So I end up doing it. I fly to Nashville, Tennessee, where I had another friend from Guyana. So I was able to use her ID to buy a motorcycle and use her address. And I bought the motorcycle. I wanted to do it on a Harley or an Indian or something like that, but I also know they're a little bit unreliable. So I actually bought a
I didn't
Honda
say it. I didn't say it.
Yeah, sorry. So I actually bought a Honda ST 1300. I wanted something that would get me around a bit. So yeah, I traveled through all the states of the USA. It took me 2 years, something like that. And I did things like Sturgis and all that sort of stuff. Went to Sturgis, parked the bike right round the back off the main street because it's a Honda. I didn't want it
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
getting burnt or something. Yeah, what else? I mean, I did all sorts of stuff. I went to Wyoming. Yeah, well, you know the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that mountain.
Mhm.
Went
Yeah.
to that mountain. That was pretty cool. Did all sorts of weird stuff. Took Route 66, saw the world's biggest ball of twine, the world's biggest rocking chair, world's biggest thermometer. Yeah, yeah. Went to Vegas, lost loads of money. Had to test it out. Had to try the gambling thing. Couldn't do it. Yeah, I just went everywhere. Went to the Hollywood sign. You name it. I did it. So it was great.
Man, that's fantastic. So what was life after the 2 years? So, this was a number of years ago. I mean, this is obviously very, very traumatic, obviously very, very impactful to your life. What did you do after this, very long, I mean, again, you did your long road west, through the States. What did life look like afterwards, and what did you end up doing, and kind of where are you today?
Yeah, sure. So after the motorcycle trip, I did do a couple of jobs in Guyana for about 6 months, and then I went to Malawi for about 6 months again, something like that. But ultimately, now I've resettled back. I'm in the UK. I'm actually now the academic manager of a computer department for a college here in the UK, in the southwest of the country. I've never been down the southwest of the country. I'm from, as I said, I'm from Lincoln, Robin Hood country, which is on the far east side. So do you know Stonehenge? So I live.
I'm not on the moon. Right. I'm American.
Okay. I don't know. It's historical. It's more than 100 years old, right? So I didn't know if it was
exactly.
So I actually live maybe 40, 50 miles from Stonehenge, something like that. That's the area of the country that I'm in at the moment. So yeah,
absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So I don't know what I'm going to do next. I will do this for a couple of years, I guess, and I will do something else. I keep saying I'm going to be a motorcycle instructor. That's what I'd really like to do. At some point, I'm going to do that. I've always had motorcycles. I've never owned a car, so I quite like motorcycles. So yeah,
absolutely. Currently, I'm a big motorcycle rider myself. Yeah.
Okay. What have you got?
There's something. So I had a Harley for a long time, and I sold that. It was a beautiful, very quintessential Harley. And I'm trying to convince Sarah to let me get a Ducati Monster.
Nice.
And so
nice bike. Yeah.
I've got a buddy of mine, a neighbor who has a KTM. He's South African. He's got a KTM, their sport version, or their kind of naked version of it.
Okay.
And I love it. There's just nothing like that kind of freedom that you have, and having, to me, it's about getting into the wind, right? Having a little bit of wind in your face. And
I like it.
What that represents.
I like it. You can get out of all the traffic and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm currently, I've got a Royal Enfield at the moment, Royal Enfield 650, which is quite unique. Normally, it's a bit not the mainstream. It's the first time I've ever gone off that. So it's called Royal Enfield Bear 650. It's a nice bike, to be fair.
Fantastic. So I guess kind of, wrapping all of this up, is there anything, that you would like to say? Is there anything? What I like to do is, kind of give the guest the last word as we go through this. Is there anything that you'd like to say to people that see this, that watch this story? Anything that you would like them to learn from your journey along that? So I'll give you the floor before we kind of sign off.
Sure. I think it's important for people to understand that in life things go wrong and bad things happen to people, but that doesn't mean you write yourself off. You can pull back from it and you can improve from that, and your life goes on and it does get better. Time is a healer. I when I first got released, I was kind of getting flashbacks and all sorts of stuff all the time. Now it's much more controllable, and I know what I'm doing in life. And if I can get through that, you'll get through day-to-day jobs, that sort of thing. And that's what I'd say to people. If you can get through the bad things in life, it makes the normality seem very special.
Oh, wow. I love that. Peter Moore, thank you so much for spending the time with us. This was an incredible, incredible interview. And I want to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for sharing this, for enduring what you had to get through to do that. And thank you for sharing the stories of the men that you were with, and hopefully we can, kind of honor their legacy moving forward. And to your friends that told you you didn't get the W on the war zone, I would like to officially say from me to you, I think that you have checked that box well enough. But with that, my
Thanks.
friend, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I look forward to anything and everything that you look to do in the future, and we'll be your first reporters.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.